What up, guys? Welcome to this episode of Santa Cruz Medicinals Radio. This is going to be one of the most important episodes you've ever watched because we are going to break down everything with health. We have Dr. Justin, we have Evan Brand here. These are two people I've trusted. I've been seeing this guy since I was young. I think since I was 17 years old.
High school, yeah.
Yeah, so in high school, I had some health issues. I went to this guy, luckily, by the grace of God, because the road I was going down with health was just not it. And I started doing functional medicine stuff with him, which we'll get into what that is, how I went about that. And this really is the way for health. Everybody who has money now that is into health is doing this. And what happens when people start doing that, the athletes, the professional athletes, the executives, it eventually will trickle down and become the norm, but it's not quite there yet. So we're going to start to tell you how these guys work. What I want to start with, guys, is this. You guys have patients that come to you. What are some clear physical signs that you see right off the bat when you're looking at someone, assessing them, that they might have some health issues of some sort? What can you see in somebody?
Awesome. So the first thing I like to get just a good symptom representation, because most people that I see are going to have some kind of chronic gut health issue. Mm-hmm. So excess burping, belching, flatulence, especially with an odor, right? That automatically tells me sulfur kind of overgrowth happening. Are you pooping every day? If you literally do not poop every day, you're not detoxifying. People talk about jump in a sauna, do this crazy cleanse. If you're not pooping every day and hydrating, you're automatically going to have your detoxification pathways impaired. So I look at just all the digestive stuff, reflux, heartburn, GERD. Do you have chunks of food in your stool? So I like to just get the gut stuff out of the way because everything comes from your body into your gut. That's where 80% of your immune system lives. That's where you make all the enzymes and acids to break and absorb everything down. So if you have a bottleneck there, you can have mood issues, energy issues, brain fog issues, all emanate from that. And of course, inflammation in the gut, inflammation in the brain. So brain fog, anxiety, depression, everything can spill from that. So I like that out of the gate, but you can look at someone's skin, right? Skin's a mirror of the gut. Do you have acne? Do you have eczema? Psoriasis? Do you have dandruff? That's fungus. How do your toes look? Ridges on your nails, zinc and protein. So do you have little cherry hemangiomas, estrogen dominance? So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Thinning eyebrows, potentially on the hypothyroid side, right? Guys may be more genetic, but do you have a receding hairline? Women, do you have thinning hair? So you can get a ton. That's just the kind of the start.
Awesome. Yeah, Evan, what are some things you see when you see a patient and they come to you and you can kind of look at them? What do you see going on?
How about dark circles under the eyes? Coated tongue. I mean, we had a friend at school, a mom at school, and she's like, "Hey, I think I have candida." I'm like, "Stick your tongue out." Yeah. In 2 seconds, you can see her tongue is coated. I'm like, "Okay, you obviously have candida. Let's go ahead and run an organic acids anyway." And we did, and sure enough, she's off the charts with candida. Yeah. So also, I would just say sugar cravings and mood swings as well. Yep. I mean, so many people think this is just my personality. I'm just an anxious person. And it's I had anxiety basically my whole college, and I had no idea that it was my gut. And actually, Dr. J was one of the first dudes to say, "Hey, we really got to look at your gut." And I showed up with H. pylori. I showed up with Giardia. I showed up with crypto because
Three amigos.
Yeah, I was out in the creek, in the lake, in the river. I was out swimming, and when you get exposed to these pathogens, they'll cause massive weight loss as well. So I lost 30 pounds. I didn't know if I had cancer or what. I was terrified, and I went to the GI doctor, and they're like, "Okay, we're going to put you on an acid blocker." So the first indication for me was weight loss. And then also my skin. It was a wreck. If you saw me as a teenager, luckily my wife saw through that, and now my skin's better.
So that's so funny that you say that because I have a very similar experience. So I got back from Costa Rica, traveling in Costa Rica. I guess I was age 18 at this time before I saw you. And I had been down there, and my skin issues were getting worse. And again, I thought I was somebody who was just really naturally skinny, which I am. There's genetic factors as well, but I was
ectomorph for sure.
Yeah, I was lifting a lot and eating what I thought was a good amount. I wasn't putting on muscle like I am today. I went and saw you. Yeah. We did a GI map test, which we'll get into what that is and how you guys see patients and deal with stuff, which is lab testing and then retest, herbal protocols often, figuring out the cause. And we tested me, and it was like, "Oh, you have cryptosporidium, which is a parasite that is really common in tropical regions." And you kind of called it when you saw me. You're like, "What were you doing? You're traveling around in Costa Rica." Okay, let's get this GI map test. Cryptosporidium. We went on an herbal protocol, which is different than what a traditional doctor would do if they even found out I had cryptosporidium. 100%. Because doctors nowadays do not do lab testing. And we don't need to get into that. It's an insurance system. They won't really let them do lab testing. They consider it like medical fraud, basically, if a healthy person wants to get a gut panel or a thyroid panel. There's it's a whole can of worms there. So I go into you. I have cryptosporidium and some other gut issues. We clear that out. It was like night and day, guys. My skin clears up. We do some of the diet stuff that we talk about, which your diet stuff is eat real food, good proteins, good fats.
Get your macros dialed in for you.
Yeah.
Micronutrients.
Yeah. And now my body starts absorbing the food. Now I don't have a parasite, which there's the whole parasite thing, and we'll get into that, has gotten so kind of overblown where people think that every single person has a parasite, which probably more people than you might believe have parasites. So what I want to get into right now is the lab testing part, because it seems like what you guys do is you see patients, you talk to them, which doctors don't do anymore. You figure out what's going on with them, and then you run specific lab work. What are some common lab tests that you use in your practice, and why?
Great question. So out of the gate, gut function is going to be really helpful, because like you have different gut tests where you look at microbes, whether it's dysbiosis or we'll kind of use that umbrella, SIBO umbrella, right? We can look at inflammation markers, which are helpful, right? Especially if someone has a lot of blood in their stool and inflammation's off the charts, it's good to get maybe a gastro to look a little bit deeper, just to rule out something that's more invasive.
Totally.
So it's nice to have those kind of more invasive markers there. But then if those look good, then this is more of a functional issue, right? Because the problem with the whole insurance model and the whole mainstream medicine model, if it's not pathology, right, insurance isn't going to cover it. And if doctors start running tests and there's not a justification regarding a disease to rule out, then, like you said, insurance fraud, they're not going to cover it. And that's a problem. And so we're looking at things that are functional imbalances. So we're looking at, when we talk about conditions, it's all on a functional spectrum. So in conventional medicine, imagine a light bulb on, that's disease, light bulb off, healthy, right? So on-off switch, it's binary. It's either on or off. But the problem is in functional medicine health world, light is a dimmer switch. So you could be 80 or 90% on, 80 or 90% way to a disease, but conventional medicine is like, oh, it's not all the way on, therefore you're fine, right? So essentially they're looking at things through a philosophy that is not sensitive enough. And they're saying, hey, we're not sensitive enough to look at this, so continue to get sicker over time, and then maybe we'll be able to put you into these disease classifications over time.
Yeah. And
so that's the problem. So gut out of the gate's going to be key. Even just a good blood test. You can get some good information from a CBC, from metabolic panel, from liver enzymes. Complete thyroid panel is going to be essential, because I see so many thyroid issues. 1 out of every 5 women have an autoimmune thyroid issue. It's the most common thing. So that's big too out of the gate.
Let's say that again, because that's huge, and we don't want to gloss over that. 1 in 5 women have some level of autoimmune.
And I have an autoimmune thyroid, so it's near and dear. I got a book coming out, Thyroid Reboot, this summer. Look for that. But we talk about that. So it's super common, and most thyroid issues are autoimmune. And so when the doctor goes and gives you some Synthroid to get your TSH better, which is important, don't get me wrong, they're still not getting to the root of the autoimmune imbalance. That's a problem, because we'll talk about the different inputs. All the foods, all the nutrients play a big, big role with that.
Yeah, so let's just, for people, let's go from head to toe, basically, with how the body works. So you wake up in the morning, your eyes are communicating with your brain. What is going on with our circadian rhythm, our neurotransmitters? Can you give me a quick rundown of that? Then we'll move into thyroid and gut.
So circadian rhythm-wise, light-driven. So we have this cortisol-light kind of ratio. As light comes up, cortisol goes up. In the first hour, it basically doubles. So you have this big input of cortisol, gets you out of bed, immobilizes glucose.
Yeah,
right?
so many people are scared of cortisol nowadays. And yes, it is the major stress hormone, but in the morning, we want high cortisol. It gets us going.
Get you going. You mobilize a lot of glucose. That's why it's good to go for a 5-minute walk when you get up, or just walk around, because you're clearing out that glucose that's in your bloodstream, right? And then from there, it's going to taper down throughout the day, and you'll be maybe 80% less at night, and there's just melatonin inverse relationship between cortisol and melatonin. So as cortisol goes down, melatonin goes up. And cortisol, it's a glucocorticosteroid. So it has an energy, but it's also anti-inflammatory. And so as you're chronically sick, you don't get that cortisol input. And that means you may not have the energy or that capacity to move. And also cortisol stimulates the mitochondria. And there's also an interplay with cortisol helping with pain and inflammation. So if you're chronically sick and you have low cortisol, that's a problem. Plus the same part of the cortex of the adrenals produces mineral corticoids to help you hold on to your minerals. So sodium, potassium, your electrolytes, now you're peeing them out. And every cell's got this thing called the sodium potassium pump that helps the cell function optimally. And so if we're peeing out our minerals, now that's throwing off how our electrical circuitry works in the body, heart, communication, your nervous system, etc.
Yeah. And there's some neurotransmitter tests that you guys can do, right? This is something a lot of people don't know about, because again, you go to your doctor, you ask them for this. This is not going to be something that a normal doctor is looking into. And as we covered, and what I like about both of you, you're totally willing to send somebody to what we call a normal doctor. If there's something seriously wrong, that is why I have insurance. If I, go surfing and I get injured, I want to go to my doctor.
Yes.
The thing is, guys, normal doctors, when you go to them and you want blood work, or they don't even know what a GI map test is. What we just talked about, cortisol, we'll get into what the Dutch test is, where it's your cortisol rhythm throughout the day, because everybody now is sort of getting in tune with, I can get my testosterone checked. That's cool. I get my testosterone checked every few months. However, we want to look at this rhythm of hormones. Your testosterone might be higher in the beginning of the day. You could get a bad night's sleep and your testosterone will be in the tank. So the neurotransmitter test, getting back to that, what is that and how does that work?
Yeah, I want to say one thing on cortisol too, because like the algorithm targeted me for cortisol videos lately. And so now every girl is like, here's what I did to fix my cortisol body.
Yeah.
But I mean, between him and I both, I mean, we've run thousands of hormone panels, and I would say it's very rare to find high cortisol, meaning these people have been under chronic stress for years to decades. They typically have low cortisol, or what we call it an inverse cortisol pattern, where now we see high cortisol at night. It's supposed to be high in the morning and have this spike. Unfortunately, most people, even people in their teenage years now, they never have that proper spike. It's the equivalent of having your iPhone battery to 12% when you wake up. You're going to try to record content all day. You're going to try to be on your phone all day. It's not going to happen. And so this idea now that's trending is that cortisol is high in everyone, and how I lost 40 pounds with cortisol. But without the testing, you've guessed. And that's our whole philosophy. We say test, don't guess with your health, because so many people are guessing. They find this supplement that's linked on TikTok shop to lower cortisol. They take it. They're taking ashwagandha in the morning.
Yeah, in the morning. Oh my God, I tell people so ashwagandha went so viral lately, and we sell ashwagandha, and I've made a bunch of content being like, personally, I take my ashwagandha in the afternoon or evening after I'm done training, done doing my stuff. I know there's circumstances where people might need it at different times, but people just started taking a bunch of ashwagandha because they heard it was good, and then they would say they felt numb. They felt, just like no emotion. So can you walk us through some of the basic neurotransmitters and what is going on there in our brain?
So, I mean, out of the gate, you're going to have two major neurotransmitters. Like, they're kind of the hierarchy. We have serotonin, which is going to have a major influence on melatonin, right? Because essentially, if you look at the amino acid, it goes tryptophan to 5-HTP, and then it goes 5-HTP. You have this aromatic decarboxylase enzyme that converts it to serotonin, and then serotonin to melatonin. And then, of course, light and dark cycles are going to influence that conversion, right? It goes darker at night, cortisol goes down. Now that conversion can happen to melatonin, right? Obviously, blue light can impact it, so that's why you want to be dialed in there. So you have the serotonin stuff, mood stuff there. That's your seasonal affective disorder kind of things. And then you have dopamine, and dopamine's going to play a major role. Do you love your neurotransmitter? Your phone pings. Oh, dopamine hit. Get a like on Instagram, right? Dopamine hit.
Yep.
Right. That connection with your spouse, your partner, that's dopamine. So that plays a big role. And so you look at the big medications, they're usually in the SSRI or SNRI camp. Then you have some kind of ancillary ones, which are going to be more GABA or your benzodiazepine drugs that are going to influence that. And then you're going to have things like glutamate. And these are going to be active more with like brain fog and inflammation. So those are kind of my big 4 to 5 kind of neurotransmitters in that area. Serotonin and melatonin are intimately connected. They're kind of two sides of the same sword there.
Let's run through symptoms too. What do you think?
Yeah.
Like if someone doesn't have organic acids, or maybe they don't have a Dutch test, because the Dutch will give some information about hormones. We'll see neurotransmitters on there as well. But just symptomatically, if you're watching this, you're like, okay, dopamine sounds cool. What do I feel? Well, it's going to be lack of energy, lack of drive, lack of focus or concentration. You get bored easily. So like if you're already bored, you want to click off this video, don't. But that could be low dopamine. So and then in terms of the serotonin as well, it's the irritability. Like there's so many marriage counselors that need to be running functional medicine labs. Like I've been credited with saving so many marriages because we look at the wife, okay, she's got low serotonin, so she's irritable, she's anxious, she has PMS like crazy. Okay, so now the husband doesn't believe her. He thinks it's just in her head. But then when we get the husband on the call and we go, look at the organic acids. Your wife is not crazy. She just has low serotonin. We're going to use some specific amino acids in certain ratios to help get her back to normal. And luckily the husbands will send an email sometime like, dude, not only did you save our sex life, you saved our marriage completely.
Yeah, and everybody gets this with, your girlfriend's hungry.
Right.
And after she eats, she's in a better mood, right? At a basic level, everybody understands this, but at a more complex level, like we are not necessarily just the sum of, we just feel some certain way.
Right.
Right now, we are a combination of the sleep quality we got last night, the inputs in our body, all the neurotransmitters going on right now. And everybody sort of gets this. If I were able to just tweak your cortisol and norepinephrine and adrenaline in crazy ways, you would feel insane, or I could make you feel very tired. And people have this going on. So Now what I want to sort of get into is like thyroid and mitochondrial health overall, some of that stuff. And you can talk about gut health because I know it does interplay with everything in the body right now. So when people just say that they're very tired, we have our friend Cookie King. He's here right now. He is always saying he's very tired. And I believe him. I don't think he's not very tired. What might be going on with somebody like that?
It's a great question. So when we look at energy, there's three big kind of like cornerstones of energy. The first thing is we're going to look at mitochondria. And mitochondria, a lot of things input mitochondria. So when we look at like, let's call it like our Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle, essentially you have three major things that funnel into acetyl-CoA. You have carbohydrate, proteins, and fats, all right? And so protein, fats, and carbs, really important. Building blocks, nutrients, if they're nutrient dense, whole foods, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting choline, you're getting essential fatty acids, you're getting micronutrients, you're getting potassium, magnesium, you're getting zinc, selenium, important things for your thyroid too. But let's pretend those protein, fat, and carbs are just junk. Let's say it's just processed protein powders with no nutrients, junky fats, and let's say a lot of processed sugar, aspartame, those kind of things. Now we're funneling our mitochondria without the nutrients to really run. Because when that mitochondria runs, it's like going somewhere with an expensive transaction fee on your credit card, right? It takes nutrients just to get the transaction going. Yeah. But if you don't have, it's like me going to the ATM, it's a $5 withdrawal fee, but I'm pulling out $1. Yeah. I'm losing $4 every time I go, right? For sure. So most people, first off, they're just funneling into their mitochondria, just junk nutrients. They're going in debt every time. So we make sure the protein, fat, and carbs are dialed in. And not just that, blood sugar. Yeah. Our blood sugar is doing this. Each time it goes up, we're surging insulin. On the way down, we're surging cortisol and adrenaline to pick it up. So you have that. Then you have the adrenals and the thyroid that interplay. So my analogy for this, because when you explain things thousands of times to people and you say the same thing, you have to get creative. You have to create analogies because it gets a little bit boring and heady. So when you're driving a car, imagine a standard transmission, okay? You shifting the car, putting the clutch in from first gear to second gear, that's your adrenals. You're dealing with stress. You're ramping up stress during the day. You're going from a smaller gear to a bigger gear so you can go faster. And then imagine like neutral, your resting tone, that is your thyroid. So if you ever start the car on a cold day, the RPMs are really high. Yeah. Or if you stall out, the RPMs go too low, the engine stalls out, right? So adrenals are your ability to shift up, go faster, go slower. Your thyroid is that resting tone to be able to control overall metabolic activities. Too cold, it runs hot. Too hot, it can overheat as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as the adrenal glands go, like when people say they need to optimize their adrenal gland function, or what are the adrenal glands doing exactly?
So most people, when they have any kind of a health issue, whatever they've been marketed to is what they think the issue is. Yeah. So it's a thyroid, it's mitochondria. I'm like, hey, here's the deal. I am open to all things. And so I just tell people, you have the right to have more than one issue going on at the same time. So just first off, suspend any belief that this is it. Some people, they're just so convinced, you try to, okay, yes, this is an issue, but also don't forget this. You try to still kind of connect the other things too. So your question is so let me hit the question again. So you talked about the adrenals. So we're looking at cortisol rhythm. We're looking at how much cortisol you're producing as well as total cortisol. Let's say we have super high free cortisol, but low total. This happens a lot with people that are anemic and that have low thyroid. And so that's on the adrenal side, that'll tell me if there's a thyroid pattern going on. Now, I'll also run a full thyroid because we don't want to just assume that because these are just general correlations. And so we'll run that as well. And then, of course, the big issue when you have adrenal issues, there's electrolyte issues. Yeah. And your nerves will not work optimally if your sodium potassium's off. And the DRI for potassium is 4,700 milligrams. Go on Chronometer. Just put your breakfast, lunch, and dinner in. I guarantee your potassium is like around 2,800 milligrams. I've done this thousands of times with patients. People do not get enough potassium. Yeah. It's a big deal.
So yeah, I mean, more sweet potatoes, avocado.
And if I just say just think right here, right? Think of a potassium-rich food. I guarantee you, ready? Banana. You're thinking of banana, right? Potassium, avocados have twice the amount of potassium than bananas do. And they're a better fat, so they're better blood sugar stability-wise too.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the fatigue one, can we? Because we need to unpack that. We need a whiteboard for this. This gets big. Okay, so you hit Krebs cycle issues. Okay, so we hit the mitochondrial piece. You hit the adrenal piece. You hit the thyroid piece. Now we got to get back to the gut creating the nutrient deficiencies. Yes. And I apologize for my voice. Hopefully it sounds good, but
you're channeling your inner Barry White today.
I'm trying to.
Come on, Barry.
All right, so in terms of the gut issues creating nutrient deficiencies, that was probably Brendan's problem. I haven't looked at his previous labs to see the history, but when I had crypto, when I had Giardia, when I had H. pylori, my nutrient levels were terrible, and we can measure that on organic acid.
So how does that happen? So you get some of these gut issues. I know everything is different. You guys see a lot of H. pylori out there. You see a lot of just gut issues like parasites, low enzymes, whatever it is. So now a human being is eating food. They're thinking, okay, I ate this today. I'm getting a good amount of nutrients. Let's say somebody's eating a steak salad. They're like, I'm crushing it. what can be happening in the gut where they're not absorbing those nutrients? Like how does that even happen?
Dude, it's a perfect question. And I tell people, you are not what you eat. You are what you digest, assimilate, absorb
Bingo.
from what you eat.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many nutrition videos out there, and it's like there's so much content out there. If you just ate everything everybody told you to eat, you would theoretically be healthy, right? But I mean, Justin and I see people all the time that they've already been eating carnivore, animal-based. They're eating organic, grass-fed. And I tell you, on paper, they don't look very good. And so what went wrong? Well, we'll just use my oldest daughter. I've got 3 girls, so we'll use my oldest, for example. When she was 2 years old, she had issues with loose stool. And I thought, I don't know, like, maybe there was some breast milk, to cause looser stool sometimes. But I thought, no, this is a little more than that. And so we ran a GI map. And sure enough, she had H. pylori at age 2. And so I see a lot of kids. Probably half my practice now is children, which is just naturally evolved that way.
Yep.
And so Summer, my oldest, she had dysbiosis from age 2. Now, I caught it early. If I did not catch that early, you get into 5, 6, 7, you have ADHD, you have ADD diagnoses. These kids end up on pharmaceuticals, Adderall or Vyvanse, which in a recent paper just showed it is leading to cardiomyopathy. It's actually wearing out the heart in these teenagers from the stimulant medication.
That's methamphetamine.
So your question is like, well, what goes wrong there? Well, if you had an infection from age 2 that you never tested for, therefore you never knew you needed to address it, this goes on and on and on. You end up as a teenager, maybe you're diagnosed with a growth hormone deficiency. So now an endocrinologist is getting involved. Maybe they are running a little bit more advanced thyroid panel, hopefully like free T3, some TPO, TG antibodies. Maybe they're adding those on, but unlikely. And over time, like soil, food, water, we're all going to get exposed to these things. It's just a matter of what is our digestion going into that, and do we have gut permeability? So when Dr. J was hitting on the GI map, one thing we specifically look at on the GI map is secretory IgA. We also look at calprotectin, which is well known in conventional gastroenterology for gut inflammation. If we see high calprotectin, we see low secretory IgA, we see high occult blood. That's the perfect recipe for a disaster, meaning you have intestinal permeability. I've got a friend at the gym who's a GI doc, and he hates the term leaky gut, but it is leaky gut. That's technically what it is. It is intestinal permeability.
A lot of people have heard about leaky gut, right? But modern medicine, conventional medicine, whatever you want to call it, does refer to this as intestinal permeability. We're talking about the same thing or similar things. So what is going on there? We have a gut barrier, right? A mucosal layer lining of our gut. And in a good world, what is that supposed to look like when you ingest food? And then when things go wrong and you have leaky gut or intestinal permeability, what does that look like?
Well, the problem is when you have mycotoxins involved as well, which I know we might want to hit on mold a little bit. It's very common, all of us, where 95% of our time is spent indoors, whereas just a couple hundred years ago in the 1800s, 95% of the time was spent outdoors, tending to the garden, slaughtering the animals, being out on the farm. So we've switched from 95% outside to 95% inside within the last 200 years or so, give or take, depending on the culture, society, climate, etc. And so when you're exposed to these airborne toxins like mycotoxins, VOCs, pesticides, for example, glyphosate can drift 3+ miles.
Yeah.
So if you maybe you could put it up on screen here, a glyphosate map of the USA. If you're in an agricultural area, we found that parts per billion, that's ppb, of glyphosate is enough to disrupt that gut barrier. So if you're not eating 100% organic, you've got to try to do your best. If cost is an issue, Dr. J and I talk about Dirty Dozen, Clean 15 foods. Look up those lists all the time. For example, one strawberry could have 20 different pesticides in it, depending on where it was grown, how it was farmed, if it's not organic. So when you go to the grocery and you see conventional, it should really be labeled chemical, because that's exactly what is in those foods. And these compounds are disrupting the gut. So you take airborne toxins because you live next to a farm that sprays, like I used to do. We used to live next to agriculture. We lived in the country. We had land, but we had agriculture. So it was a huge, this crazy situation. You have the airborne toxins, you have the mycotoxins in your home, at your children's school. So a lot of kids that I see, they're at summer camp, they're at school, and the parents are like, why when they come home from school are they irritable? They're cranky, they're fussy, they have dark circles under their eyes, they have sugar cravings, they have tantrums, they have outbursts. A lot of it is because they're getting hit with cleaning chemicals at school as well. They're using Fabuloso or other toxic compounds. So you take the food toxins, you take the airborne toxins, you take the internal dysbiosis, the parasites, the H. pylori you could have had since you were a young child. 51% of the world population has H. pylori. So we're not talking about rare stuff here.
Right.
And you combine all that, and that's exactly how we end up with a recipe for disaster for gut health, not including a credit card or two that we ingest a week supposedly
plastic,
now.
Yeah, plastic,
and
the
then just
microplastics.
the like poisons that people consume, like alcohol, which like can cause gut issues. So when somebody starts to get that leaky gut, what is then happening when they eat their meal? They think they're, just like crushing it, but they have some leaky gut symptoms. What's going to happen? That food's going to go into their body. What happens in the gut?
All right, let's do a physiology 101 review, right? You chew up food. The first start of digestion is that gastric phase. You're starting to chew your food up. You're masticating. That's creating amylase enzymes. Chewing does a couple things. It breaks the food up and increases the surface area. So enzymes and acids in the stomach can work on it, right? So it increases the surface area and it stimulates amylase production from the salivary gland. So that's the first thing, right? So how many times do you chew food, right? So I tell patients, don't get super anal about it, but about 32 chews or so, in general, about an oatmeal-like consistency. That increases the surface area. And also, I just tell people out of the gate, like, start your meal with some kind of either breathing through the nose, in, out, prayer, meditation. Just try to get that, connect to a feeling of gratitude that gets the parasympathetic nervous system going. That gets your enzymes and your acids going.
The rest and digest.
Automatically.
From an anthropological point of view, it would not be normal to be hunting or being chased by a tiger and then eat. And some people, they get home from traffic, work stress, they're on their phone and they're trying to eat. So we start chewing, we start masticating that food, the enzyme secretion starts to go.
We increase the surface area. Now what happens is we have to drop that pH. Your stomach should be about a pH of 1.5 to 2.5.
And so real quick, I could just have to say this. A lot of this stuff that's gone viral lately on social media is the whole alkaline thing.
Oh, we'll go into that. I'll hit that. That is just...
Our stomach is acidic. We'll leave it there for this.
And also when people say that, the best response is acid alkaline where? Right? Where? That's the better question. So in the stomach, we want about 1.5, 2.5. It's highly acidic. That does three things, okay? The first thing is it activates enzymes. All right. The big one is pepsinogen to pepsin. That's your big proteolytic enzymes. Number two, it closes the esophageal sphincter so food cannot go up and regurge. Okay. And number three, it's a mild disinfectant, right? Think about it. Every mom blogger does a multi-surface cleaner with a white vinegar, right? It's the acetic acid, which is great. Awesome cleaner. I use it on my boat. It's amazing. Gets soap scum off like crazy. So there's three things, right? Close the esophagus, disinfects, get your enzymes going. Now all that food's mixed up. It's called chyme now. It gets released into the small intestine. Does two things. Triggers cholecystokinin. Really important. That tells your brain you're starting to be full. It's the reason why you can't eat too many eggs or too much steak because you'll get nauseous, right? You can overeat carbohydrate. You don't get that feedback loop. You get that with proteins and fats, all right? But you want to give it time to be able to move in because these things take a little bit of time.
Hey, so, what do you think? Sorry. Yeah, what do you think about, should we tell about the mechanism of H. pylori? Because we keep talking about bugs, but we're not talking about the mechanism. Yeah. And this is a perfect place to interject the H. pylori, the mechanism of damaging the parietal cells.
So again, H. pylori is going to damage the parietal cells. The parietal cells do two things. They make hydrochloric acid and they make the intrinsic factor that binds to B12, right?
So hydrochloric acid is going to help us break down that food and digest it and assimilate it.
Yes. And with H. pylori and with gastritis or atrophic gastritis, it's a double-edged sword. So meaning like, okay, you make intrinsic factor, which is good. That's the baton relay of it binds to B12 and then B12 reabsorbs it at the end of the ileum or ileum, small intestine. So it's the only vitamin like that where it hands it off, it binds something and then reabsorbs it. It's really cool. So this is when you've got issues, B12 is a big deal because that impacts the nervous system. That impacts blood maturation because blood's like opposite. They're like big adults and they actually get smaller as they mature. And so big goofy red blood cells don't carry nutrients effectively, right? And so we have that, right? So H. pylori comes in and it produces an enzyme called urease. And so when you have protein metabolism, you have urea, it spits off. So you have urea and then the urease enzyme hits the urea and you get CO2 and you get ammonia. So when you do like this H. pylori breath test, they're giving you some urea and they're looking for that spike in CO2. But go look at a pH scale of where ammonia sits. Ammonia is 11. Right?
Gotcha.
It's supposed to be 2.5. So now you start to move. Now, again, it's not like a zero-sum game. You start to gently move your stomach up more alkaline. So now digestion and enzyme activation is less optimal. Does that make sense?
Totally. So for most people out there, they might be having some symptoms of, after I eat, I get indigestion, I get whatever. Why should somebody not just chew Tums over and over again? Because that seems to be the most common thing. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Why would somebody not just want to, I get this indigestion, let me just chew Tums?
Yeah, just Google calcium carbonate pH. You're looking at a 10, 11 pH.
Gotcha.
So you're taking that pH way up. And so that starts to, when you understand what healthy physiology is, that just blocks that healthy physiology from happening. When you look at almost any drug, they work in two major mechanisms. They block reuptake in ports or they inhibit enzymatic pathways.
Gotcha.
You can go look at ACE inhibitors for blood pressure. You can go look at proton pump inhibitors for B12, or so for acid. You can look at SSRIs or SNRIs for neurotransmitters in the brain. The list goes on and on with that.
So for our friend Joe, for example, he was having some indigestion issues, and we started giving him digestive enzymes. Yes. And he was like, "This is insane. They've gone away." Obviously, we need to do some lab work on Joe, get to the root cause. But why simply adding in a digestive enzyme that we're working on formulating right now? Why would that provide him some relief? Like, what would be going on there for somebody that has indigestion? They start taking some digestive enzymes. Some of those symptoms go away. Why would those help?
Because the pH level is not fixed. So imagine, if you look at a domino rally, right? The first thing is chewing. Got it. That's the first domino. The next thing is we have that increase in acidity, low pH. That starts to activate our enzymes, okay? And then that's going to then positive feedback loop cause more enzyme production. So we're missing that second to third domino. So you're adding in more enzymes, which is good, but you're still not fixing the pH issue. Gotcha. So ideally, you do both. Now, here's the issue. This is where people listening at home, if you have atrophic gastritis, you may not be able to handle that acidity. It's like you go outside, you surf too much, you get a sunburn, you got back pain. You may want me to give you an adjustment or do ART on your back, but your skin's too raw to even handle it, right? So then it's like, all right, what's the right therapy? So then you may not be able to handle it. So you may have to work on soothing the skin and that mucosa in the gut lining before you do something more abrasive. And that's where we rely more on enzymes because they're more gentle. But again, you have to fix the pH stuff. But that's where we'll do maybe some bitters and things like that. And we'll do like aloe or manuka honey and do soothing things in the gut lining.
Absolutely. And so with enzymes, for example, what we started to do is we did some digestive enzymes for me, and you were saying like when I'm traveling, when I'm stressed, if I'm recording a bunch of podcasts and stuff, like you recommended like, hey, if you're gonna eat a big meal, like that's right after doing something stressful, flying, that's a really good time to take enzymes. What is the relationship with stress and like digestive enzyme production or function?
Parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system function. So when you look at sympathetic nervous system function, prehistorically, that's creating cortisol and adrenaline. It's actually adrenaline first, cortisol comes later. That's gearing up and mobilizing glucose. Why? Because stress responses almost always meant you were running from your life or you were fighting someone to your death, an animal or something, or who knows, right? And so that involved lots of glucose. And so the problem with people in their stress, they're not actually having to run or fight. So now they have all this freaking ton of glucose in their bloodstream. It's like they ate a candy bar. That's why I'm like, you get stressed, you get lit, 10-minute walk. Get that glucose out of your body. So it's driving blood flow here, right? Where should blood be for optimal digestion? Here, right? So parasympathetic nervous system function, cranial nerve 10, vagus nerve, right? That's going blood to the core, right? That's why cold therapy does help. Initially a sympathetic response, but the blood goes where when you're cold? Protects the organs. That's why I like cold, because it does get that parasympathetic going, nasal breathing, right? All that. So it gets the juices going. So when we see someone who has digestive issues, you fix the enzymes. You fix the acids, right? The last thing was bile. So we talk about, all that food going from the stomach to the small intestine, that cholecystokinin compound, that causes the gallbladder to relax. And now you're emulsifying fat, because most digestive issues are a combination of rancidification, putrefaction, fermentation of food not being broken down. You get these big freaking food globules. Now leaky gut's a problem, because now instead of these being broken down into peptides, they're big proteins going in their bloodstream, creating more immune issues, molecular mimicry, etc. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. For people with heartburn, what is going on with that? Because I hear that so much. People are like, heartburn. I'm getting heartburn. The acid's like coming up. What is that?
So the three things that acid does and pH does in your stomach, right? Activates enzymes. We hit that, right? It is going to close that esophageal sphincter, number 2. And then the third thing is it disinfects. And so when you don't disinfect and you have microbes overgrowing, and then you have the esophageal sphincter more open, and the food's not being broken down because there's inadequate acid, then the food ferments and rots, and it creates its own acids within the rotting of it, right? And so those acids are what rises up due to that sphincter being open. Not to mention, on top of that, we don't have the enzymes there to break it down. We're not chewing well. And then we have that gut lining that's thin. We may not be able to handle acid, just like my sunburn analogy. And that's where we come in with more enzymes to overcompensate for it. But you still got to fix the pH issue and the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system function, because that's what's driving the acid secretion. Right?
Totally. Sweet. So switching gears a bit here, I think one of the most debated topics right now in nutrition is red meat. Red meat is just, whenever I post myself making a steak, or when people come across my page, they know I'm into health, but then suddenly they see me cooking a steak, they might go, what? I thought that was unhealthy. Why do we see these headlines? That's a huge question, but why do we see these headlines all the time saying red meat causes colon cancer, red meat causes diabetes, red meat will cause our heart to just stop and die? And tying into that, the issue with saturated fat, cholesterol, And I don't think anybody here is saying, eat a whole stick of butter every day, get your cholesterol as high as possible. But you guys also eat red meat. We had some steaks last night. Why, as people who are obsessed with your health and are constantly reading the research, are you not concerned with red meat killing you?
It's a really great question. There's so many documentaries out there, game changers. You could do forks over knives, and essentially a lot of this just comes down to propaganda, right? People aren't dealing with the right questions. And so when I have this argument with patients, not argument, but it just gets brought up, right? And it's happened thousands of times, okay? There's some good references. You can look at Chris Kresser on Joe Rogan. He's done some good stuff on it. But if I break it down, there's the emotional argument and then there's the science argument, okay? So first off, the science argument, very simply, is most studies when it comes down to meat is survey-based studies. Yeah. People go, they fill out a survey. They're like, oh yeah, I had pizza tonight, which there's like a little bit of sausage and pepperoni, but it's mostly a bunch of carbs and processed sugar and fats. Or I had a hot dog, it's mostly a bun. Or I had whatever type of processed meat thing, right? Or barbecue sauce, laddered with sugar and like high fructose corn syrup, right? So when you really look at these things, most of that data is survey data where there's a bunch of processed crap in with the meat. Now you go factor in now a steak. I grilled some fish. I had a nice can of tuna with some avocado, right? I had a nice, chicken thigh on the grill, right? Those are two different types of sources of meat.
Yes.
So we have to look at that. First, the survey data is junk. Mm-hmm. Now we go look at protein. We go look at the micronutrients. Most of these micronutrient scales, right? When they look at meat, there was one that was out 2 years ago where it literally had, like, I shit you not, it literally had Lucky Charms having more nutritional density than a ribeye and eggs. Yeah. And so when you look at how these algorithms go, it penalizes saturated fat.
Yes.
So saturated fat's in the algorithm, but when you actually look at the nutrients that are in eggs or in steak, right? Most of steak is stearic acid, right? It's stearic acid. It's really good, healthy fats. And these are incredibly nutrient dense. If you look at the amount of protein it takes from kale, for instance. So I'll ask you right now, how many cups of kale to equal 6 ounces of ground beef?
Oh my God. I mean,
how many cups?
You need a bucket full, 6 cups, 8 cups?
16 cups.
Okay.
And what will happen is vegan vegetarians will tell you, oh, no, but these vegetables are really high in protein. Well, relative to the fact that relative protein, meaning there's like 2 calories in it, and like maybe like a fraction of a calorie is protein. Yeah. So it's like 20 or 25% protein, right? Sure. That doesn't mean you're getting 30 or 40 grams of protein in a reasonable serving. So you have the protein density. That's a big deal. Then you have the micronutrients. And then when you start adding in organ meats, it's a no-brainer. When you look at the B12 and the vitamin A, because most carotenoids found in vegetables, right? They're just not going to have the full spectrum vitamin A. They'll have beta carotene, right? And
which is like a 14-to-1 conversion to like usable vitamin A. So.
Yeah, and then you have the short chain fatty acids like linoleic acid or linolenic acid in flaxseed. Well, only 10% gets converted via the delta, I think 6 desaturase enzyme.
Yeah,
and
so
if you're insulin resistant, you're
on
screwed.
Chia seeds and flax seeds at the store, you'll see it'll say contains a bunch of omega-3s, and I've done a few posts on it where that's not going to be converted to usable DHA and EPA. It's just not going to be converted.
No, you got eicosapentaenoic, which is a 20 carbon chain fatty acid, docosahexaenoic, which is the 22. These are the longer chains, which are really important for your kids' brains. So when you have learning issues and brain issues, you got to have those good fatty acids there. So when you look at the protein now, okay, so let's say we're not relying on pea protein or hemp protein powders, right? Mm-hmm. Well, how do you get your protein? The average vegetarian combination of protein is 5-to-1 carbs to protein. Mm-hmm. So if you need, let's say you need 150 grams of protein per day and you're not willing to do protein powders, you're getting 400 grams of carbohydrates today, 300-400.
That's a lot.
Unless you're really active. And vegetarian, vegan diets, they're self-selecting for ectomorphs, right? Their body type, these are why you see vegan vegetarians commonly, they're bikers, they're marathon runners, they're dancers, because they're yoga instructors, because that body type of being an ectomorph self-selects for those sports and activities, and so they gravitate towards that. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So when I think Nick Diaz was a vegetarian or he ate only fish for a while, he is training an insane amount every day. So if he's going to get a lot of carbohydrates, he's going to be able to hit some nutrients and hit some proteins with that more plant-based style diet, but he's also an elite athlete amongst elite athletes, so he's cranking through so many carbohydrates.
Yes.
Where if somebody who does a normal 40-minute workout, a few times a week, starts to hit that 400, 500 grams of carbohydrates per day doing plant-based, they might run into some significant issues.
Yeah, and if you're not being intelligent with combining, methionine and lysine is super commonly deficient in vegan vegetarian diets. And what are the rate-limiting amino acids to make carnitine, which is so important in the mitochondria, right? It's methionine and lysine, right? My Lippincott biochemistry textbook in doctorate school literally said vegetarians are commonly deficient in these amino acids, causing less carnitine in the carnitine shuttle. It's like, oh, you have mitochondrial issues.
Yeah.
No crap. And then if you're now, let's say you're not an ectomorph. Let's say you're more of a mesomorph like me. I'm like a middle linebacker. I can get bigger or smaller. Or you're an endomorph, like that's your like lineman, right? Your lineman type. Then you're screwed because that amount of carbohydrate, when you eat that amount of carbs and you're a meso or endo, you naturally want to take a nap.
Yeah.
Right? Ectos, let's go surfing. Let's go out, right? They're like ready to go. If you're an endo or meso, forget it. Nap time.
So what would you guys say to people that say, okay, but saturated fat increases your cholesterol, increased cholesterol leads to heart attack?
American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 2010, meta-analysis, over 16 studies, no correlation between saturated fat consumption and heart attacks. And the biggest issue, when you look at, you look at the data on statins. When statins came out, they were looking at essentially just LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol. Now, when you look at the data of what actuaries underwrite people for like preferred life insurance policies, once you start getting above 5 to 5.5, that's where you start to lose that preferred plus rating on life insurance, right? And these are the guys that are designed to like write $1 million policies to make sure to no risk of whether or not you're going to die. And so if you're under like a 5 to 1 or less, you're in better shape. Now, when you eat good fats, guess what happens to your HDL? Your cholesterol may go up a little bit, but your HDL goes up to the roof.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing now, it's going to be oxidized cholesterol and small dense LDL. Well, guess what brings that up or improves that ratio? Good healthy fats, good healthy proteins, and keeping your insulin resistance and your omega-6 in check. So that's the problem. There's 6 times, 7 times more correlation with heart issues with oxidized cholesterol from trans fats, from excess processed omega-6 and sugar and processed carbs than there is with anything with total cholesterol by itself. And again, the Framingham Heart Study, right? You did not see an increase in heart attacks until 320 or higher.
Interesting.
On total cholesterol.
So for a lot of people, they're saying, hey, I want to be healthy, so I'm going to throw out the butter, some of the saturated fats, and I'm going to switch to soybean oil or canola oil because those will lower my cholesterol. If a patient comes to you and is saying something like that, like, you know what, I've heard of beef tallow, I've heard of butter, I have heard of coconut oil, but I need to replace those with canola, corn, safflower, or soybean oil because those lower cholesterol. What exactly would you say to a patient like that?
Well, the problem with a lot of these things, this is just like how canola oil is processed.
Yeah,
there's all kinds of solvents and bleach and deodorizers and hexanes. So it's those fatty acids, if you could extract them in a pure form without destroying them in the emulsification filtration process, there may be some benefit. The problem is you cannot extract those oils in a way without damaging them. The best vegetable oils that you can process without damage are going to be extra virgin olive oil cold pressed, avocado oil, maybe some palm oil. Those are going to be best
because those are fruits, and when you have to get oil from olives, it's a very simple process. Coconut being a fruit, and
the drip family, yeah.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing. People like I think if there was a cold pressed canola oil in dark amber glass, that's interesting, I guess. Like, I mean, hey, we all will go out to eat and sometimes eat seed oils, right? Like it happens. Like we're going to go to a steakhouse tonight. Yeah. If they cook something in seed oils, I don't think any of us are going to panic and throw it away. Prefer they cook it in butter or beef tallow, but that's just me. So, but that's not what's happening with seed oils, correct? They're using reused seed oils in fryers, and like what's happening with like the oxidation of those seed oils when a Taco Bell is using that same oil for a couple weeks?
Yeah, so if you look at an omega-6 fatty acid, right? So you go back to like organic chemistry, like pre-med, right? This kind of makes the most sense. When you look at a fatty acid structure, right? It's a carbon, and then you have 3 hydrogens on the end, and then it goes a single bond, carbon, 2 hydrogens, carbon. So when you look at that, that's what makes a saturated fat. So a carbon typically has 4 bonds on it. That's saturated. Now, once you start adding double bonds in, that's what now is unsaturated. So depending on how many double bonds, that's either your omega-6 or omega-3, depending on double bonds. Now, why does this matter? If you're an organic chemist, you understand the carbon structure starts to become more, let's say, breakable, more fragile the more double bonds are there. The single bonds make it robust and strong. Think coconut oil, right? Coconut oil solid at room temperature, right? That's a protective mechanism. If you see a fat that's liquid, you automatically know it's either monounsaturated, olive or avocado, or it's polyunsaturated, your flax, or any of the other oils you mentioned, right? And so the chemistry structure is what allows it to oxidize or not. And so then if you're doing a vegetable oil that's cold pressed, great. Save it for like 1 or 2 out of 10 on your sauteing scale, or just use it for a dressing. And then avocado oil is pretty good, smoke point wise. And then
so you recommend that sort of limitation because you want a good omega-3 to 6 balance, right, in the body. Is that why you're saying, hey, don't overdo it on those?
Well, also you can literally take a good healthy oil like olive oil, and you can break it down with heat. So you want to apply the right fat for the right heat. And then, like you mentioned, in general, I like at least half of all my fats being saturated, and the other monounsaturated fats, olive oil, avocado, or palm, and try to make sure at least 80% of your fats are solid. Because like we said, we go out tonight, right? They're going to have some fats that are going to be potentially off. So if you have that 80 to 20 ratio, I go to Mexico a lot with my family. I like all inclusives because I have young kids that need like that kind of stimulation. When I go there, you go to the omelet station, they got their vegetable oil. I would just say, yo quiero mantequilla. Mantequilla. Cook with butter, por favor. So I'm always about butter. They're like, what? Because everyone uses the vegetable oil scoop. I'm like, so mantequilla. Yep. So it's key. So if you're going to places, you just make the request. Like, give me mantequilla, please, or coconut oil, whatever, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, if people were to hang out with us, we're pretty reasonable. It's about adapting to the world.
Everyone's got butter.
And people think this stuff is so crazy. A lot of the stuff that we're avoiding and talking about has only been around for the last 80 to 100 100%. Years. Some of the stuff, 30 years. So it's really not some crazy thing. Now what I want to get into in the podcast is some sort of rapid fire stuff that we'll ask both you guys that'll really, really help people about kind of some stuff that you guys do in your life, some supplements you take for different things. So we're going to start off with joint pain. What are some things, we'll start with you, Evan, of somebody could take or do for joint pain? And obviously, the answer to all of these questions that you guys would want to say is get to a functional medicine practitioner, run labs, get it done, figure out the root cause of what's going on. But we're going to put that aside for right now because for a lot of people, they want stuff they can start doing now. Someone has joint pain, nothing severe, some knee pain, some shoulder pain. What can they look at?
I would say boswellia is awesome. Ginger, resveratrol. We use a lot of enzymes as well. So we'll use serapeptase. I love enzymes. I take them almost every single day. They're amazing for keeping the blood healthy as well. So we can use stronger enzymes that come from earthworms. We can use moderate level enzymes. And this is an amazing tool that you can feel better within like a week. So on this flight, I was on enzymes because you have an increased risk of DVT and other blood coagulation issues when you're traveling long distance on, 4+ hour flights. And so I'm taking enzymes just for that. Also, I want to make sure when I get to town that my elbow actually works. If we're going to go to the gym this morning, I'm not going to be stiff. So I love enzymes. I take ginger as well, which the cool thing about what we do is it's very broad spectrum, meaning like you can take ginger for the joints, but also ginger is an amazing biofilm buster as well. And so if we have chronic infection driving the inflammation in the joints, well, ginger might actually not only lower the inflammation there, but it actually may help increase the breakdown of the biofilm that's protecting these pathogens, driving the infection in the first place. So things like Citrobacter, for example, we'll see that on the GI map, driving the joint pain. We'll use these enzymes and herbs in the immediate time, like, hey, we're going to try to buy you some relief. But then if we just fix that gut bug, the joint pain's gone.
Yeah. What about you?
So the autoimmune stuff is real. I've seen many patients with chronic psoriatic arthritis or RA that literally gets turned off, right? Let me give you guys a different take because I'm also a chiropractor. So on the physical medicine side, chiropractic care can be helpful. Myofascial release, ART can be helpful.
Yeah.
I'll use, I have
active exercise. I mean, we're diving deep into that this weekend, going to stretch effect, a place you're like, guys, if you go to your normal PT, I got a pinched nerve in jiu-jitsu a couple years ago. It sucked. And I went to the normal Kaiser PT and it was good for me to go there to have this experience. Like it was a good reminder. I was like, I'll try it out. The guy says, well, just try doing some neck circles. And that's all they left me with on a Zoom meeting.
Unbelievable.
Okay? So that was another good sign of, okay, then I went to someone really dialed in Sunnyvale, works with pro athletes, and I got that issue resolved through corrective exercise, through active release technique. So all that stuff's really good. Keep on going.
The biggest issue with modern day PTs is they do not address tissue quality a lot of times. And they do not do a lot of decompression issues sometimes. They don't have like other modalities like cold laser. Some will do ultrasound, but big fan of cold laser. 635 nanometer red light frequency or 805 infrared are amazing. Especially infrared can penetrate up to 4 centimeters deep. And then you can plug in specific frequencies. I have a class 3B medical laser. And so we can plug in frequencies to harmonize with cartilage, with tissues, with ligament, right? So that's really powerful because those tissues are avascular. They don't get a lot of blood flow. So how do you drive improvements in healing? We could add in BPC 157 peptide in there. We can do corrective exercise, super helpful. Just get a stand desk. Get a desk that you can stand up half the day.
Yeah.
I mean, just that's huge for that lower cross syndrome of those overly tight hip flexors and weak extensors, right? So that's powerful there out of the gate. Collagen. Like I put 20 grams of collagen in my coffee every day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's building block tissue right there. Have some bone broth, right?
Yes.
Good for your gut lining too. And then on top of that, talked about the peptides and the laser. I think that's a good starting point right there.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some things you guys do for your home? So obviously you talk a lot about mold. Mold is a huge issue. When my fiance and I were looking at some houses, there are houses that you can just tell have mold just right off the bat. I mean, you guys have become really experts in this, of going into a house, being able to smell it, and so there's a musty smell. Then you can obviously do some of the mold testing and find out there is mold in the house. There's air quality, there is light stuff. What do you have in your house? Like, what do you have rocking in the house of Evan Brand? I'm going to come visit you in Florida.
Yeah,
so
come on
What
down.
do you got in there? What are some things that people can do? Air filters, are those good?
Yeah, I mean, we've got air filters in every room. We like to use ones that have charcoal-based products. There are some Chinese ones on the market. People get big affiliate commissions to promote those. So I will just say that some of the biggest promoted ones you see might not be the best in terms of the actual potency of the filtration. But new construction generally is what I try to go for if I'm buying something. Now, new construction can still have mold. So there's a guy I've seen online where he does home inspections. I love thermal imaging cameras. I did a video that popped off pretty quick on thermal imaging. I bought a new one. I love it because I was using one that plugs up to your phone and it was junk. So even in new homes, this guy walks around with thermal imaging cameras and he'll see things like a shower pan leaking. So you're asking, what are my strategies? Well, one of those is to do a walkthrough at least once a quarter, take a thermal imaging camera and a moisture meter. Anything that seems questionable. Dr. J and I both have had issues with window trim not being adequately sealed, where you have a crazy storm. We have hurricanes that come in Florida. That high wind, that high moisture level, high humidity all the time can get in through those windows and create issues there. I have two whole house, not only whole house air purifiers, but I have whole house dehumidifiers connected to the HVAC. So not only are you filtering the air, but you're also dehumidifying it. And we are pulling out so much water. It's scary how much water you are sucking out of a house on an average summer day in Florida. Even here in California, you can still have moisture. I mean, this morning we saw the fog and the clouds that had to burn off this morning. So every morning when you're at 70, 80% humidity, if these people are opening their windows, they're opening their doors for fresh air, that's amazing. But if you don't have adequate dehumidification to suck that moisture out over time, this is important, even without a water leak, no plumbing leak, no roof leak, over time, high humidity alone can create mold. And how does this relate to joint pain? Mold causes joint pain. It causes dizziness. I couldn't drive for 2 years. I felt handicapped. It was embarrassing. My wife had to drive me around. At one point I had a Tesla, so I would use the autopilot feature when I didn't trust myself, to drive me around, because the vertigo I had for mold was huge. So a dehumidifier, it's an investment for your home, but it pays dividends all the time in the air quality. And then also we have whole house water filtration, a carbon-based system. I told you the funny story how our system froze, and the first day after our system busted, my oldest daughter said, "Daddy, I can smell the chlorine in the bathtub."
Oh my God, guys, the chlorine in water is insane. I've done so much content on it. I mean, I guess, I've traveled to foreign countries where they don't chlorinate the water. I guess it's an impossible problem for the United States to solve, going, how do we make our water not have like crazy bacteria, whatever. So they chlorinate our water.
Right.
And there's studies on drinking chlorine leading to kidney issues just right off the bat. So what is going on with our tap water? I guess we'll move into that. You have reverse osmosis filter for your drinking water, and then a carbon filter for your house, because you can't do RO with the hot water, right? So you do a carbon system in the house. You can shower in decent water. And then for your drinking water, you guys have reverse osmosis, right?
Correct.
Why are you not drinking tap water?
It's a great question. There's a lot of different chemicals in water in general, right? So the goal of the government or the FDA or whoever's regulating our municipal water supply is microbes. They're knocking down E. coli, cholera, right, typhoid, whatever that in the microbe in the water could be, they're trying to knock it down. It's typically not going to address parasites. I mean, you can just go 1994, Milwaukee Tribune, like 5 people died of cryptosporidium in the water in Milwaukee in the mid-90s. So it's a real thing. So you're not getting parasites. You're not getting microplastics. You're not getting glyphosate or pesticide runoff. Google Texas Tribune 2018, 10 million Texans in my state have atrazine above the EPA safe limit in their water supply. Wow. And again, atrazine is a chemical hormone disruptors. You can just go type in UC Berkeley atrazine 2007 study on frogs. You'll see all that, right? So that's a real thing on hormone disruption. So that's not coming out in your typical municipal water supply. So we want a 4 or 5 stage microfilter RO that's going to strip the microplastic, the pesticides, the glyphosate, any of the parasites, and of course the bacteria as well, and any of the hormones. Not to mention that, like you go have a statin drug, right? You're peeing that out. Where does that statin get filtered out? So you have homeopathic levels of birth control pills and statins and SSRI drugs and lithium in the water. And so how does that get out? Right? And so you want to get that out, and then you can go just type in fluoride and childhood IQ. Fluoride, not the best. There may be some topical benefit, but definitely not an unregulated, administered oral or, internal benefit. It's like saying, hey, sunscreen helps with the sunburn. Let's just put it in our water and drink it. Doesn't quite make sense, right? And there's a lot of data on supporting that. But either way, if you want it, you should be able to know what you're getting, right? Sure. So that's key out of the gate. And then everyone's like, well, RO water destroys your minerals. I'm like, hey, bud, it's way harder to pull toxins out and way easier to add minerals in. Yeah. So toxins out first.
And so we have our electrolytes, like I'm sipping these throughout the day, sodium, potassium, magnesium. One thing I want to ask you as a doctor, because I get this question all the time. There's salt in these electrolytes. People are afraid of salt. Our government tells us, I think, to get 2.3 grams of sodium, no more than that per day, or else you're going to have tons of issues. Why are you not afraid of salt?
Well, it depends what kind of salt. Most processed foods have regular junky sodium chloride-based salt that has a bleaching agent, or there's iodized salt, which unregulated amounts of iodine can increase autoimmune thyroid issues. So I don't love those. But if we're talking about healthy salt like Celtic or Himalayan or real salt, that's a multi-mineral salt support. So like Redmond's out of a salt mine over in Utah, Redmond's, Utah, that has 72 different trace minerals. Love that, right? Absolutely love it. So that's great out of the gate. So when we differentiate salt, much rather use the healthier salt. And then we have that's going to support our electrolytes.
And so what about people who say, hey, Brennan, there's salt in your electrolytes. Isn't that going to give me high blood pressure? What's going on there? Why should somebody who's an athlete or in shape, why should they not worry about using a salt-based electrolyte? I'm going to get high blood pressure and die if I use this. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a ton, right? It's like a 2 to 3 maybe increase in millimeter of mercury. Here's the deal, though. Why is your blood pressure high to begin with? So you look at the physiology 101 breakdown. Insulin's being produced, typically through excess carbohydrate or lots of processed food. Insulin will pull sodium with it. Water follows sodium. So if we increase sodium and we increase water volume to the overall system, right, what happens to blood pressure? It goes up slightly. But what's the culprit? The culprit's the insulin, not the salt. And then we have salt that's a multi-mineral supplement, like a Himalayan, Celtic, Redmond's, or we have processed salt. So if we're doing the real salt, the healthy salt, and we're keeping the insulin in check, then that problem really isn't an issue. Now, maybe some people that have very high blood pressure and kidney issues, they may have to for a period of time. We'll be very careful with that, but that's not the average person. That's not a problem.
And just elaborating on that, the sodium potassium pump that you've talked about and sort of this electrolyte balance, how does that work in our body? So our body doesn't just need electrolytes, like that's a broad term, but it does want this sort of balance. Like we're sweating out certain electrolytes and our body wants to replenish them. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, how much salt you need in a day, right? It's about 500 to, maybe 1,000 milligrams, right? When you look at what the average American gets in processed food, you hit that very easily, right? So that's kind of where that is. But we want healthy versions of that. So if you're not eating processed crap, well, now that's not coming in. So the salt that you're getting typically, unless it's bone broth, right, is you're adding it to that food. You're adding it to your beef, your chicken, your vegetables, your seasoning, whatever. And so then you have control over the good stuff. So it's easy to hit the amount of salt you need. Potassium requires 4,700 milligrams. And so that's really hard to do, right? I told you the exercise, go on Chronometer, plug in your food. That app is good because it will tell you all the micronutrients. Yeah. MyFitnessPal will tell you the macros and the percent and the calories. This will too, but it will tell you the micro. So I like that. And we essentially need, I think it's like 2 molecules of sodium out, 3 molecules of potassium in. And then we have this influx of potassium and sodium to help our cells communicate at a cell membrane physiological level, right? Cell physiology 101. And so if we don't have enough of those nutrients, that's a problem. Does that make sense?
Let's hit the blood too, because you can see elevated hematocrit on blood. And I saw that for a long time. So after I had mold exposure, I started looking into everybody else and I was like, okay, it's not just me. Everyone has high hematocrit. What the hell's going on? And so it turns out that when you have mold exposure or mycotoxins that are stored in your body, or you got those through your mother, through the placenta, or through breast milk, unfortunately, That's one downside to breast milk. Also plastics in breast milk, chemicals in breast milk. It's crazy. A bit of a tangent, but when you have mold exposure, it affects what's called ADH, which is your anti-diuretic hormone. And so a lot of people that are walking around, they are chronically dehydrated, and we can see this show up in the blood. So I think this is a bigger problem that people just don't recognize. And just simply drinking water, unfortunately, it's not really enough. You almost have to use binders to get the toxin out to then stop that hormonal cascade of the anti-diuretic hormones screwing you up.
That's interesting. One of the most requested things is acne. Okay. And this is one of the reasons that I saw you back in the day. Yep. And now my acne is completely up to me. I call it, if I choose to go off and eat some takeout food or whatever, it might come back a little bit, some stress, some bad sleep, but I literally know what my body needs to make my skin feel good. And it's amazing. It's helped my life so much. For people, let's break it into two things. What is going on when you have somebody that comes to you with acne? What would you look at versus maybe a normal dermatologist? And then what is the deal with ACCUTANE? So many people are just going to a dermatologist. They're talking to them about ACCUTANE. They get on ACCUTANE. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So people are in a really tough position because they go to their dermatologist, right? They've gone through, medical school 4 years, 3 to 4 years of a dermatology residency, and they really don't have much education in nutrition. And anyone that's been to a dermatology office, there's like these little pamphlets that are right there, right? And then it will say, is my diet causing my skincare, right? It's my acne. And it says, no. Yeah. That's a myth, but whatever, right? And that's like a 1970 study. We can go debunk that all day long. But that is 100% false, okay? Your skin is a mirror of your gut. It's a mirror of your hormones. So when you look at, when I deal with patients, I like to juxtapose what conventional medicine does to treat things and then what we do. Because when you look at the modalities, like the tracks, you're like, oh yeah, that's not fixing really any of the root cause things. It's just like painting over rust on your car versus like actually fixing it, right? Mm-hmm. So first modality is going to be like, let's say a topical antibiotic. Think like tetracycline, think clindamycin, think retin-A, think different, right? Or not retin-A, but different. And these are like topical antibiotics to knock the bacteria down in the skin. Makes sense, right? Because if you look at the bacteria that's overgrown, it's Cutibacterium acnes, right? Literally cutie, right? It's hilarious. So Cutibacterium acnes. So we're knocking that down, and that's eating the sebum on your skin, and that's creating these cysts or these pustules, right? So that's mechanism one. Two, how's that sebum getting in there that the acne is eating? Well, that's almost always inflammation and insulin. So if we're eating processed food, insulin-rich foods, right? Carbohydrate, processed carbs, sugars, flours, grains, gluten, that's going to create that. Food allergens can also create insulin. That's why gluten's a big one. Dairy can be insulinogenic. So even though I like ghee and butter, maybe out of the gate, if we have an acne issue, the first month we keep it out. So we have sebum production, and then we have, due to excess insulin, we have bacterial on the skin. That's why a topical routine can help. That's why I'm a big fan of like 10% sulfur soap. That's why I'm a big fan of my bag. I have a really good witch hazel based toner that gets the pH dialed in. pH makes it harder for microbes to grow if you have a good pH. Cleans out the pores. Good sulfur soap will strip out any of the junk in the skin, maybe a little salicylic acid or tea tree kind of cleanser. That'll clean out the bacteria. But then you got to moisturize, right? Because if you talk to any really good doctor on skincare health, like to the celebrities, the key is like moisture, moisture, moisture. Now, you don't want your body to overproduce it because then that can feed the bacteria on the skin. So you want to clean the bacteria off. I'm a big fan of like non-comedogenic oils. I'm a big fan of emu oil. You can do tallow as like a 1 or 2 on the comedogenic scale. So there's different things you can do. We don't want to feed that, but we want to keep it moist. And so conventional medicine, topical antibiotics, number one. Then there may be, then we have the androgens, right? For women, it's more androgens. And that's going to be usually insulin as well. So PCOS, you get a lot of this, the hair on the jawline for women, you get the cystic acne. That's testosterone. So a lot of times women, they'll do spironolactone as an anti-androgen, right? And then from there, I mean, you're going to do your differin, your clindamycin, all your topical antibiotics. Now you go into your synthetic, either your retin-A, which is like your retinol that's kind of blocking the skin stuff, or you're going into the ACCUTANE, which is a synthetic vitamin A. Now that is just basically taking the oil production away from your skin. But the problem is now you're prone for systemic eye and skin dryness for the rest of your life potentially. And then also vitamin A is so important for the thyroid. It's obviously teratogenic. They'll tell you if you take it while you're pregnant, it can create birth defects. Vitamin A is so important with your hormone function, male hormone, female hormone, brain function too. So vitamin A is essential. And so when you look at what they're trying to do, decrease sebum, well, why don't we just do it by getting the insulin in check, getting the inflammation in check, maybe having a healthier topical routine, and then, of course, the gut, right? Because a lot of the hormones and these toxins, healthier gut function will minimize a lot of that in the skin too.
Gotcha. Yeah, I noticed that for myself. Like, it was just amazing to be able to clear up my skin through just basic supplements, diet, stuff like that. So that was absolutely amazing. What do you think with skin health?
Side effects too. We should hit side effects on that. I mean, you've got the lower androgen you just mentioned. Actually, a best friend of mine reached out that his wife had apparently been on some sort of dermatology routine remedy for years, and her sex drive is just completely gone. So, I mean, you're affecting your relationships as well. I mean, it's always going to be the gut for me. I'm going to run a GI map. We're going to see infections. Like if you take somebody with acne, 9 out of 10 times you're going to see infections. You're going to see a combination of bacteria, yeast, fungal, potential mold problems as well. And the cool thing is herbs are broad spectrum. So we might use herbs that actually treat the bugs and help the skin. So him and I, we like Paul Diarco. We like thyme. Yeah. We like horsetail, tinospora, French tarragon. Yeah. So the cool thing is the herbs that we're actually using to suppress the pathogenic bacteria that are actually creating the acne, we're actually healing the skin by healing the gut. So we tell people like, look, if you want to heal your skin, you got to heal your gut. You got to fix it from the inside out. Now, some of the topical stuff he's mentioned is amazing, but most people have already done that before they come to us. They've already been to 5, 10, 15 different practitioners, doctors, specialists. They don't want another cream, another remedy. And so if you have acne, if you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have chronic fatigue, if you have joint pain, every single one of those issues, it's always going to lead you back to the gut. Facts. Every single time.
Yeah, it's true. For a lot of people, they're chasing this clear urine thing. This is like become a trend where like people want to drink so much water that their urine's clear. It makes them feel healthier. A lot of people like will think of a good day in health for them as they drank so much water that their urine is clear. Why might somebody not want that?
It's a great question. I mean, if you're drinking, there's a good blend of water, how much you should be having, right? Like if you read Your Body's Many Cries from Water by Dr. Potman Gillich, he talks about half your body weight in ounces, right? Obviously, the more you're sweating, right, important. Plus, me having like Mountain Valley water, rich with electrolytes, or like my Topo Chico or your Gerald Steiner is different than like your RO water. Because if you're not intentional, you can easily dilute electrolytes with too much water. That's called hyponatremia, right? And you can have cardiac arrest or just have your muscles won't function. It'll twitch a little bit. You'll get fasciculations, right? Your heart, maybe you may go to either low heart rate or you may have heart fasciculations or palpitations due to minerals. And so
when somebody's having that weird eye twitch, that might be they've, just like not mineralize their body correctly?
Yeah, it could be just a combination of sodium potassium thing. It could be lack of sleep, cortisol, which then creates an electrolyte issue. So all of those can be a big player. And so my general recommendation is if you're taking a good B vitamin, if you're taking nutrients, your urine will look yellow. It's good to have expensive urine because that means you're filling up your bucket and then extras going into the urine. So that's actually not a bad thing. Yeah. And then number 2, just make sure the water that you're consuming is within that, half your body weight. I'm like 210 pounds. So I would be trying to get, my 90 to, a gallon of water a day. And I go through maybe 4 of these a day with good quality minerals in. And if you have that amount going, I'm not too worried about it, but usually a tinge of yellow is pretty good. If you're overdoing it, that's a sign that maybe electrolytes and vitamins could be overly being peed out because there's too much water.
Gotcha. Sweet. And then,
but also too is like, if you're drinking too much water, why do you have that craving? And most of the time you're not getting enough electrolytes and your body's using the water to get the electrolytes, but it's not there. So if you get the electrolytes in and you're not intentionally overriding it, you won't overhydrate because your electrolytes are telling your brain you're good. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. Another thing I want to get into, because I've noticed working with you, the dosage on supplements, right? Like there's been times where we brought up my vitamin D levels a while ago and you were like, okay, you're going to take about 20,000, I forget the exact numbers, 20, 30 or 40,000 IUs of vitamin D for a period of time to bring the vitamin D levels up. Now, if I were to go to a normal doctor or just Google online, they would say that's a crazy dose of vitamin D. And now that I'm more in the supplement world and I really start to realize how a lot of these supplements are made and they don't want to make a product that has some insane dosage, why do you guys use like in some certain, vitamins and stuff and like herbs, like you go pretty hard with the dosages.
Yeah.
What can you say to people overall with dosages of vitamins and minerals and stuff like that? And I know it's different for everything, but just elaborate on that.
Is there any specific one we should hit first to be more?
Let's look at vitamin D because we sell a vitamin D product and it's 5,000 IUs of vitamin D. Yeah. People will do some Googling and they'll go, oh my God, I'm only supposed to get 800 IUs of vitamin D. What's going on there?
It's a great question. So you have to say, well, why did research initially recommend levels that are so low? And when you look at most vitamins, they're recommended to avoid a pathophysiology when it comes to medicine. So like scurvy and having hemorrhagic, capillary fragility, or having literally heart failure and beriberi, right? That's a B1 deficiency. or we can go to rickets in vitamin D, right? And so to avoid rickets, it was that 20, I think it's ng per ml of vitamin D, and that would avoid rickets. The problem is Dr. Hollick out of BU, a lot of other researchers found that higher levels of vitamin D did all kinds of things, balancing your T regulatory cells, helping with autoimmune issues. People that had more vitamin D did better with all kinds of different virus and bacterial infections during the wintertime. And then autoimmune issues too. A lot of times there's VDR polymorphism, vitamin D receptor sites polymorphism. That's why we want to be at 70 to 90 or so with vitamin D when it's autoimmune, or 50 to 70, just generally speaking. And that's going to require a dose that's, I would say at least 1,000 IUs per 25 pounds of body weight. And, you can do that for 1 to 2 months and then retest.
Yeah.
So 5 or 10,000 IUs. And when you're out in the sun and you hit that minimal erythemal dose, your skin's pink, you can make about 10 to 20,000 IUs just like that.
So getting in the sun, this is another really debated thing. We were just all before this podcast, we were just kind of chilling in the sun, getting some sun. Yeah. What is going on with sunscreens, sun exposure, vitamin D? We made a sun balm product that has non-nano zinc oxide. Now, this isn't some new thing, guys. I'm not like breaking the mold here. There are mineral-based sunscreens. You can find them at every single store, and they use usually non-nano zinc oxide as the active ingredient there. And then there are chemical-based sunscreens, which use oxybenzone, avobenzone. Some of those are banned in some areas. In Florida, they're banned because they kill the marine life. And stuff, so those chemical ones are harder to find in Florida. What's going on with that? Do you use sunscreen? If so, and do you get sun? What's the deal? Is it going to kill me?
So I do a lot of boating. So first thing is you got to look at your skin tone, right? I'm more fairer skin, so I try to go out when the UV index is around 2, and that's where I let my skin get exposed. Now, if I'm during the day, I'll typically wear if I'm going to be out in the sun, like no shade, I'll wear like an SPF 50 shirt, maybe a collar to it, pop it up, so I don't get that burning effect. Because you can go look at data on migrant workers in the early 1900s when their diets were great, and they would have lots of skin cancer and lots of wrinkling if you're outside all day long. You don't want to get burned. Yeah, you can definitely destroy your collagen, increase risk of cancer by burning. And so then you say, okay, if I'm outside and I can't grab shade, you have your physical SPF shirts that are like 50 or higher. That's great, awesome. And then you try to get your minimal dose like I am, right? This is great. We're in San Diego, it's about a 4 out there. UV wise, that's good. 15, 20 minutes for myself, I'm good. But if I'm out there too long, then I'm going to use a really good physical deflectant, typically a zinc, a non-zinc based, a non-nano zinc, right? So a bigger molecule of zinc for the skin, or like a titanium dioxide is going to be pretty good. And then you can always look at the Skin Deep Cosmetic Database, or ewg.org, and then they'll kind of look at the chemicals in there and they'll rate them from like cancer and reproductive health issues. So that's great once you've tapped into your minimal erythemal dose, your skin's pink, but you don't want to burn.
Yeah,
and so that's a good next step for that.
And that'll help you bring up those vitamin D levels, some of those hormones, right?
But even that, they've done studies at UC San Diego State, where they looked at people in this area where we're at like a 32, 33 latitude right now, and people here still were massively deficient.
Yeah.
So it still probably won't be enough. And
so people go out in their jeans and a t-shirt for 8 minutes and they go, I got my sun. People make jokes. I'm getting my vitamin D. It's like, dude, you need to be in small board shorts, getting your total body sun exposure. And then for like our buddy Joe, and like you have fairer skin, so it's like you will probably still need to supplement with some vitamin D
a little bit
to get those levels up. When you're at home with the kids and stuff, I know the answer to this. Are you spraying them with oxybenzone sunscreen?
But just say one last thing though, right? You go outside, you run for an hour, right? You get some really good vitamin D. That pre-cholesterol is on your skin. Guess what? You sweated your butt off. Now you probably just went and took a shower. You showered it all off.
Interesting.
That's got to get now dry and absorb on your skin. So you went out for an hour and now you washed it all off your skin, or a good chunk of it off.
That's interesting.
That's a problem.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so the gut bacteria thing's crazy. Like the vitamin D deficiency dysbiosis link is crazy. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to link the people with gut issues, and then if we run their blood, we'll look at the vitamin D on the blood. And the vitamin D is always low when we have dysbiosis. So it's crazy. There's a couple of papers on this, but if you look up vitamin D gut bacteria or a vitamin D microbiome, just simply this is crazy because people think you just have to go straight to the probiotic. Just simply increasing vitamin D increases the diversity in the gut.
Wow.
How strange is that? Just adding vitamin D. My grandpa, actually, he got his conventional doctor to prescribe vitamin D, but it was 50,000 IU once a week. It just doesn't work as good as the everyday. So for my kids, we're typically just going to do a long sleeve. If it's the middle of the day in Florida, you can get your ass burned in Florida quite easily. It's intense down there. The latitude is, it's pretty intense. And so we often get out, and we're usually done by like 11 a.m. We're usually out 8 to 11. You're not peaking at a UV of 11. And you know, I like to feel the sun. So I will go like shoulders, I'll go neck, but I still try to leave some unexposed skin, because the truth is, even if you're doing the zinc-based products, you are reducing the effectiveness of the sun to be able to synthesize vitamin D. I still want to try to get vitamin D levels up. And I've seen people in South Florida, they're out in the sun every day and they still have vitamin D deficiency. So it's crazy to see that on paper. But even Dr. Mercola, years ago, I interviewed him, and he was walking on the beach every day. And he claims at his age that he was able to maintain it. But I've read some papers that as your skin ages, the conversion of sunlight to active usable vitamin D is not as efficient. That conversion process is reduced with age. So, I mean, this might sound crazy, but you know, there's even some benefit to a specific tanning bed. There's some clean tanning beds that have different different spectrums. Yeah, and you got to measure the EMF and stuff in those, but. I usually supplement about 5,000 a day personally. And then my kids, we got them at about 2,000 IU. I've got a kids multi, we'll get 2,000 IU in that. And usually that's enough for kids.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good protocol for most people, is to get some sun when you can, depending on your skin tone, different times of the day, you know, and obviously sunlight exposure in the morning. Huberman has really popularized this, you know, getting your brain fired up. In the evening, circadian rhythm, just like dialing in, looking at the sunset, and then supplementing with some vitamin D to bring those levels up. Vitamin D is one thing you can harass your normal doctor for a test. If you say the right stuff, you can probably get a vitamin D test. Now, when a normal doctor will look at that vitamin D test, what I've noticed is, even if you're at like what is the measurement, 20 nanograms per
it's ml or something like that.
So they will, in that 20 to 30 range or 20 to 40, they'll go, you're good, no worries.
20 to
but
30.
You would really recommend people get to 60 to 90, around 70.
The average person, 50 is good. If you have a known autoimmune issue, 70 to 90.
Gotcha.
That's pretty good. And if you go back and you look at like skin issues from the 70s, 1970s, or early 2000s, if you look at sunscreens, most of them only blocked UVB, which is 5% of the light spectrum. 95% is UVA. So the problem is UVB is what causes burning. So if you take away the signal of a burn, right? I got the sunscreen on, I'm not burning. But now you're damaging the crap out of your collagen, because that vitamin A is just destroying your collagen tissue. So that's the problem. A lot of people had skin issues from the 70s to early 2000s because we didn't have full spectrum sunscreens that blocked out UVA, B, and C. And so when you're using a really good zinc or a good one that's going to have a good a good physical, you know, blocking aspect, right? There's chemical that absorb, like oxymetallazine or oxybenzene, right? These are going to be absorbing. Then we have the physical deflectants. Think of a mirror on your skin, right? Think of like the 1980s Lifeguard that was all kind of zinky white. We have better ones today, but that's going to do A, B, and C. So you're going to block, but you're not doing the UVA damage to your skin.
You ought to look up the CDC melanoma in the U.S. state. If I say melanoma, you're going to say what? Probably Florida. You're going to say Arizona, Texas. It's not. I believe it was actually Washington State. So this idea that like sun equals skin cancer, I mean, some of that's been debunked. I've tried to do as much content as I can on it. And then, you know, a few trolls will say, hey, you're not a dermatologist. But I've had dermatologist friends say, yeah, I don't know what to make of this data. I don't know why the hell melanoma is that high up there versus south.
Yeah, you see even African Americans on the bottom of your feet. I mean, go figure on that, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. One thing I want to get to is lab testing. So let's talk about some of the lab tests that you guys do and what they are. And so what I've seen from you guys is commonly it'll be GI map. Let's have you talk about GI map. And then let's get into Dutch test, organic acids, and maybe some basic blood work, because that might be beneficial for people that can't do this deeper functional medicine work. They might be able to get a basic blood panel, micronutrient panel, mineral panels. What do you guys do commonly?
So I like just people come in, we do a full kind of new patient consult workup. Most people will have some kind of a basic blood test out of the gate. So I like to look at it because I can look at protein levels via creatinine, bond or serum protein. So that's helpful there. I can get a good window into electrolytes, whether it's sodium, chloride, CO2, anion gap, and potassium. So that's super helpful there. I can also get a window. Do we have some subclinical anemias, right? Lower RBCs, hemoglobin's below 13, hematocrits in the low 30s, right? So that tells me a lot, especially if it's a female and they have estrogen dominance and they're bleeding a lot in their cycle. So those can be really good things out of the gate. Either eosinophil is a little high. Is that a sign of potentially some mold, right? Or histamine imbalances? Are your monocytes greater than 10, right? That tells me a little bit there. Your neutrophils, greater than 70, H. pylori. So most people have these, and so I'm just so good doing thousands of them. I can just be, okay, there's a couple of patterns I see, and then I'm like, all right, now let's go do these specialty tests, and then we can go deeper into, let's say, a gut test, like a genetic test like the GI map that's going to look at different dysbiosis markers.
And a GI map is weird for a lot of people. You get this kit. You literally mail in your shit to a lab and they look at it, and that's weird for a lot of people to hear about and do, but even just looking at the test, you get so much data in there. So what is in the GI map test when you get the results? What are some things that you're able to actually see in there? It's fascinating.
And tell them too, it's only one sample. Years ago, we had to do 3 days of collecting.
I think I remember that back in the day. Now it's
the
easier.
401H, that'd be 3 or 4 days on that one for sure. So I mean, page 1 on that test, I mean, you're looking at different bacterial pathogens like E. coli, O1H57, like the one that you see with the spinach in the supermarket, different sugar-like toxins, salmonella. You're going to see
Giardia is on page 1.
Gut viruses, crypto, Giardia, E. histo on page 1. I'm just going to my head. Page 2, you're going to see at the top H. pylori and the different virulence factors. At the bottom of page 2, you'll see the normal bacteria flora, bifidobacter, lactobacillus, so your probiotics are there. We want those in the upper half of the range. We'll see your different commensal, your bacteroides and firmicutes. We'll see Faecalibacterium prausnitzkii. We'll see Akkermansia, bacteroides, etc. And then on page 3, we have our despotic markers. So Klebsiella, Citrobacter, Pseudomonas, Morganella. And we can see the standard deviation. So a lot of times we'll see people with 100 to 1,000x above the reference range.
Wow.
And so that's a big deal than just someone who's a little bit. Like if you're within 10x, it's like, not a big deal. We can probably just use some good probiotics, get your diet better, get your digestion better, and that can kind of just take care of itself over time. But if we see it significantly out of whack, that's helpful. And then page 3 at the bottom, we have all the fungal yeast markers, right? So Candida, it's hard to pick up that on a genetic stool test. It's really hard.
What do you tell people? Because like we do the organic acids.
We see it at all. We see it at all on the GI map, then we know it's a problem, even if it's under the reference range. But I tell them, I mean, you're going to look at your 3-oxyglutaric, your diarabenose, your tartaric acid.
Do you think it's sticky, or what do you think it is? I mean, because like 9 out of 10 people that test positive on the oat, they test negative on the GI map.
Yes,
and they 100%. Want a good explanation. I just tell them, look, I think it's sticky and it's just hard to pick up in the stool.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to a urine test is more of a systemic marker, where a gut test is more of a localized gut marker. And we know fungus can be more systemic, hence in the hair, right? Seborrheic dermatitis, dandruff. On the skin, it's tinea versicolor. On the fingernails, right? And then we have on the, on the genital area, right? Yeast infections, right? It can be everywhere topically.
A vaginal yeast issue as well. So women that are like, hey, I've been to my gyno, I've been on diflucan, fluconazole, itraconazole. Yeah. What do? I can't beat it. GI map's going to help you as well, especially for the ladies. And the crazy thing, a little bit of a tangent, but I think this is important to note here. We have to get the male partners involved as well. So like I would say probably 80-90% of our practices are female in general. Yeah. And a lot of those females, they think it's all them. And they're like, I need to treat me. I need to fix my gut. My vaginal microbiome is messed up. We'll do vaginal probiotics. There's specific strains of bacteria that help vaginal flora, for example. I actually saw that trending on TikTok, apparently.
Oh, yeah. There's new
vaginal strains and species.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the crazy thing is, when a woman says, hey, well, when I'm with my partner, if we have sex, all of a sudden I have this UTI or I have this, bacterial vaginosis issue. And so we try to get the males on board with the GI map as well, because we'll find oftentimes they have dysbiosis as well. And so often you have to fix both parties. And in my case, like I told you about with my daughter earlier, just sharing cups, sharing spoons, you can share pathogens in a non-intimate way. So, hey, that's a really good looking water bottle. I'm going to take a drink. Boom, you could get H. pylori just through saliva. So this idea that, you're the only problem, sometimes it's husband, wife, and the children as well. The entire family ends up having to be treated. Hit page 4 too. Let's hit page 4.
And then just hit that too, because there's one big thing. We'll do some mold plate testing. People that have serious yeast issues, we'll see it come back on the mold plates. We'll see Candida like 15 to 20x on the plate, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we have no animals, so no animals are bringing it in." And I reach out to JW or Jeff, and they're like, "Yeah, if they have a lot of Candida, that could potentially perforate out in their." In their skin, or they're just kind of exhausted their body, right?
Let me say that another way, because I don't want people to like glaze over. Yeah, that's crazy. So the Candida overgrowth can be so bad. You were literally off-gassing Candida into your environment, meaning if you don't treat you're contaminating your environment. You get a new girlfriend that comes in. She's going to be breathing in your Candida spores in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Ladies, don't be with unhealthy guys. They're going to give you Candida.
And then this is like, we talk about the acid-alkaline balance, because I deal with women that have vaginal issues all day long. And one of the big things, we talk about pH, right? Well, what's one of the big things that takes a woman's vaginal tract and makes it more alkaline? Birth control pills.
Oh my God.
And so
that could be a whole episode.
Yeah. And so that will take a woman's, because the vaginal pH should be below 5. So when microbes come in, whether it's from semen or just from the environment, that's going to make it hard for those microbes to grow. And so we'll run pH strip tests and make sure that woman has a history of UTIs or BV, vaginal bacterial vaginosis, or urinary tract infection. We'll see where that canal is. Usually it's above 5 or up. And that's a problem. Even though it's still acidic, it's still, the microbes can proliferate. And so good healthy bacteria can help that. Because Literally, Lactobacillus acidophilus is Latin for acid loving. So good healthy bacteria does produce acid that makes it harder for microbes to grow in certain areas.
Yeah. Let's hit the rest of page 4 on the GI.
Page 4.
We'll hit
parasites again at the top. Blasto, Pentatrichomatis hominis. We have crypto on there too. We have different amoebas up there. And then we go to the worm section right below that. And then at the top of that, we have our IgA levels. We have our STIAT, which looks at your mucosal membrane barrier for your immune in your gut. Then we have our elastase, which looks at pancreatic elastase production. We want to be 400 or higher. If we have lower elastase, I always think maybe there's low hydrochloric acid because acid is so important for enzyme activation in the pancreas. Then we have our steatocrit. That's your malabsorbed fat. So if we're not breaking down our fat, it comes out in the stool. That could be a sign of biliary insufficiency, low bile salts. And then after that, we have our inflammation markers, our eosinophilic protein or calprotectin, which are inflammation markers. Calprotectin, I think, is more on the colon, right? EPX is more on the small intestine.
Yeah, well, also too, the eosinophil activation protein, that's going to say, hey, you've got an irritable bowel disease. You're in Crohn's territory. You're in ulcerative colitis territory as well. And the occult blood is amazing to test on there as well. And these are some markers that your conventional gastroenterologist will acknowledge. Some of the markers that we test, unfortunately, they blow them off.
Yep.
But the stuff that we've seen it thousands of times, we'll see these correlations between this parasite, this bleeding, this pancreatic insufficiency, gallbladder removal. We got to throw that in there. We'll see elevated steatocrit
we talked about, and then the occult blood, and then anti-gliadin antibody, which is a gluten sensitivity marker. I like that better than the blood because it makes sense. The gluten's interacting with the microbiome because it's coming in the intestinal tract, the mouth, right? And so then we're having that immune reaction there, and then we're seeing it in the stool. So we can see the gluten antibodies there as well. That's pretty much rounds it up.
Yeah, right? And what does that mean to the average person? Well, that means if you're questioning, do I need to be away from gluten? Everybody says gluten-free, I'm going to go rice flour with my cupcake. I'm going to go, rice flour with my waffles or something. Well, I call it the gluten lie detector test as well. People say, hey, I'm gluten-free, and we'll see anti-gliadin IgA, indicating they've been eating gluten or they've been exposed by accident. But that's an incredible indicator to say, hey, you have a gluten sensitivity problem. You definitely need to avoid it. So that's pretty much the GI map. And then at the very bottom, the antibiotic resistance. So if there is an H. pylori problem, they'll test it against antibiotics because conventional therapy is triple or quadruple antibiotics.
Yes.
It often doesn't work. And we can see those test positive there, and it'll show like fluoroquinolones. What is
amoxicillin, doxy. Usually your quad therapy is going to be like your claritomycin, amoxicillin, or they'll sub it for the doxy. Some will do quad, but they'll do bismuth plus a PPI or just a PPI by itself.
And we don't use those, by the way, just to lay it out there, we don't use those. We use herbal antibiotics, herbal antimicrobials. They work amazing.
And the problem is most people, when they have these problems, they don't just have one issue. Like, okay, maybe there's some data saying that these things would help if we just had one microbe, like just H. pylori.
Yeah.
But then now what about the rebound overgrowth? Because even more doctors are getting more keen to the fact of like, oh, I'm going to prescribe an antibiotic. I'm going to also prescribe ketoconazole or fluconazole with it, and then a probiotic for 3 months afterwards. So those are your better doctors because they at least understand the imbalance, but most aren't even doing that.
Yeah.
And then the herbs are better because we can go into a whole host of reasons, including efflux pumps and oxidative mitochondrial damage, etc.
Let's hit the oat because I know we hit GI map. He wants to hit other labs. So the organic acid test.
Yeah.
Wake up, peanut cup. It gets as easy as that. In a small child, 2-3 years old, we could do pediatric collection bags. So if mothers are watching, they're like, hey, how do I test my child? We do kids all the time, 6 month, even 1 month old babies. I've been able to collect urine. They tape it to the diaper. They collect the urine. Unfortunately, we've seen candida in 1 month old babies. I actually did a video that did pretty well on what happens to a child when a mom lives in a moldy home during pregnancy. And we had a 3-year-old little boy. He was off the charts with mold colonization. It was actually pretty terrifying to see levels that high in such a young child because, there's behavioral issues associated with that. So let's run through the oat the same way that you did the GI map because that's fun. So page 1, it's all yeast, fungal, mold, Clostridia. If we see elevated HPA, this is important. So if you all get this done, it'll make more sense. But on autism spectrum, ADD, ADHD, we're typically going to see Clostridia. Now, mold exposure increases the opportunistic infections, including Clostridia. So let me say it one more time. What that means is if you lived, worked, breathed, you stayed in a dormant college, your office building was hit with a flood or something, when you're exposed to that mold, that is promoting more Clostridia, and Clostridia does a massive number to your brain chemistry. It affects, there's a whole neurotransmitter page that shows the impact of Clostridia on the brain. So now we're back to anxiety, depression, these type of mental health issues. Page 2 is a fancy picture.
Well, I want to hit a couple things. So talk about the colonized mold markers, and also talk about how Clostridia can impact dopamine, because there's a dopamine connection there. Can you hit that?
Yeah, sure. So basically, dopamine beta hydroxylase is normally supposed to work, and it's supposed to help break down your dopamine into your endorphins, your catecholamines. Yes. But when you have Clostridia elevated, it inhibits that process of that enzyme, and so you have this abnormal HVA-VMA ratio that we'll see in the brain chemistry. And so these are the people that unfortunately they have emotional problems. They may be driven to addiction. They may end up with either Adderall, or maybe they're on Vyvanse, or you mentioned the GABAergic stuff earlier, like Xanax, lorazepam.
So they may have lower adrenaline, higher dopamine.
A lot of times.
So they don't have that adrenaline to deal with the stress.
Yeah, and these are people that, they cry at the drop of a hat. These are the emotionally sensitive people that, once again, they think it's my personality. I'm an emotionally sensitive person. That's just me. But reality, when we improve the neurotransmitter function, they go, you know what? I don't cry at the drop of a hat anymore. Or females will say, hey, this time of the month, I'm so emotional, don't mess with me. We can improve that by fixing some of the stuff we're describing here. So that's page 1. And then you wanted me to riff on the mold colonization.
Yes. I have so when I was 12, 13 years old, was getting into some trouble in school. Everybody will relate to this. You go sit down with a counselor. They refer you to somebody. My mom brings me somewhere. And she meant well, of course. Sat down with this lady for 15 minutes. They prescribed me some type of Adderall. It was like Adderall. And luckily I didn't take it because I took it a few times. Didn't make me feel good. Thank the Lord.
Numb you out.
Yeah, it just made me feel bad. So what somebody like you and what I'm going to do with my kids is, if they're having issues, I might run some lab tests. And if I see those markers that you're talking about, then we would use protocols to fix that. So keep on going. But that's just insane, guys. Just think about that for a second.
So, well, especially boys too, because boys are kind of like thought of as defective girls in the public school system, because girls do really well younger ages, sitting down, listening, writing, being at a desk. Boys, depending on their personality, are free range. They got to go do stuff, right? Because their energy. And so most of those kids, especially boys, are now put into the category of 20% of fifth graders are on these Ritalin, methylphenidate drugs.
Insane.
That's a problem. That's brain development too, though.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a whole like two-hour podcast that we can make out of this. But I want people to at least know the acronym of PANDAS: Pediatric Acute Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Strep. Okay. This is crazy. We can measure strep in the GI map. On the organic acids test too, we're going to see different bacterial markers like hippuric acid, hydroxybenzoic acid as well. And so a lot of children, let me just put it simple. If your child is having a meltdown that doesn't match the situation, okay, you took their Hot Wheel away. You said no more iPad, and it's the end of the world, and it's literally tearing your marriage apart. You have to consider this potential autoimmune issue associated with bacteria, meaning the immune system by accident in the crossfire of trying to target these pathogens targeted the brain of the child. They could have major emotional swings. Like if they have the best day of their life and the worst day of their life in the same day, that's a clue. Mm-hmm. If they have sensory issues where they don't like the tag in their t-shirt, they don't like their underwear, they don't want to wear socks, these pants, they don't like the seam of the socks, they have sensory issues with their clothing. They may have auditory sensation issues where they have to have headphones on. They may have visual issues where they have to wear sunglasses. They may have issues in the car where they're car sick. This is all related to histamine, bacteria, mold, fungal colonization. So let me circle back now because Dr. J wanted me to hit this. So when you get exposed to mold, there's two situations that can happen. You can either be a mold reservoir, meaning you're storing the mycotoxins, or you can be a mold factory where you're actually creating and generating internal mycotoxins. Now, why is this scary? Well, because let's just say we're in this house here, there's no mold here, hopefully, and you brought the mold with you from your last house. Your clothing could be contaminated. Your bedding could be contaminated. Your couch, your mattresses, all those things could be contaminated. But you yourself could be growing it, meaning you move to the desert island, you could still be sick with these type of issues. And so we'll measure that on the oat, and we can use herbal antifungals up the nose. We can use herbal antifungals in the gut to fix it. And then all those issues we see on page 1, that affects the mitochondria, which we've hit Krebs cycle already. But when we see chronic fatigue, issues with athletes, we see a lot of post-exertional malaise. We were laughing last night after we had steak. We were watching the video of Cookie, and you were pushing him and running him up the hill. Yep. And I said, dude, like, to the average person, they may say, oh, he just needs more willpower. But in fact, he could have, we'll run his oat and see, he could have an issue where he has impaired mitochondrial function driven by a fungal problem. Mm-hmm. And then the brain chemistry, we're going to measure the dopamine, the serotonin. They don't measure GABA on the oat. I wish they did, but they don't. Nutrient levels, nutrient deficiencies as well. We've seen people that they look picture perfect health. They have 6-pack abs. They look great. They're chiseled. They have the vasculature, nature, whatever. But on paper, they have low vitamin C. They have low B vitamins. We see low CoQ10 as well. And so these are the people that on paper, they look beautiful. They could sell their online course, how to get 6-pack abs or whatever. But nutrient wise, they are depleted. A lot of those. And over time, a recent podcast I did with Dr. Malcolm Kendrick, he wrote a book called The Clot Thickens, all about vitamin C deficiency and how it's actually driving the cardiovascular disease because the C deficiency is allowing more plaque buildup. It got a little geeky, too geeky for today, but long story short, these nutrient deficiencies are a game changer, and that can really help you to identify, do I need a multivitamin? I kind of poo-pooed multivitamins, honestly. Like a decade ago, I was like, no, that's silly. Who needs a multi? Like, I'm going to do organs. I'm going to just fix my gut, and I'm going to eat well. I'm going to eat grass-fed steak every day. Look at the nutrient profile of liver. I'm going to be fine. But on paper, these people that are eating carnivore, animal-based, etc., they're still nutrient deficient on paper, and the oat test is what we use to prove that. And then I'll add one more thing onto that urine, which we can get as fancy as we want. And by the way, these tests, it's cheaper than the cost of a new iPhone to do some of these tests.
Absolutely.
Like cost wise, it's really not a terrible thing. And the cool thing is on the urine, we can get a lot more data. So if we want to measure glyphosate, I've seen some scary glyphosate numbers. If we want to measure toxic chemicals as well, we can measure xylene. So the women that are doing hair dye, the women that are doing fake nails, nail polish, we can measure nail polish chemicals. And all these things are endocrine disruptors as well. So if we're talking fertility, which I've had dozens and dozens of babies through the clinic of women that came to me saying they had fertility problems, we'd run extra labs on the urine. So one urine sample can generate 3-4 reports, which is amazing. Heavy metals we can pick up in the urine as well. So urine is really an incredible tool. And if you've got that clear urine, I don't know what's going to show up if you're diluting yourself that bad.
Yeah, just chugging water. That's amazing. Yeah. So that's an organic acids test. So the one I want to get to next is the Dutch test. So I've done this with you twice where it is it's urine on the strips, right? Is that the Dutch?
Yeah. So
okay. So for that, it's interesting, guys. You pee on these strips throughout the day at different times of the day. Yeah. So you're not getting these are my hormones. This is like a picture right now at 9 a.m. this morning. You're getting an actual picture throughout the day, and the lab result you get shows you a day of cortisol and everything. So let's get into the Dutch test. What is that?
Yeah, so a couple benefits of it. By using urine, we're able to get a window into free fraction hormones. When we look at hormones, 2 to 5% are free. That means think of like the key in your hand into your lock, right? Mm-hmm. That's your free hormone, right? 2 to 5% are free. Think of the handful of keys in your back pocket. That's total. Like it's in your pocket. It can't go into a receptor site or a keyhole, right? So 2 to 5% are free. The other 95 to 98% are in that kind of total camp. So we get a window into what's bioavailable and then what your overall glandular amount is. So one looks at physiology, one looks at glandular output. Both are nice to look at. So when we see cortisol that's high on the free but very low total, that could tell us about anemias, low iron, potentially low thyroid. So that gives us some window. Plus, it could tell us about HPA axis dysfunction. Or if we have high total but very low free, that could be some big HPA axis issues where you're producing a lot, but why is the hypothalamus and pituitary shifting your amount so you have very, very little free amount, but super high total. So it tells us a lot about that HPA axis. And then when we create protocols, we'll do a lot of herbal things that will help with that. Obviously diet and lifestyle to get that parasympathetic response up. And then we're going to get that morning awakening response, right? We're going to get that 1 hour later. So our cortisol awakening is looked at there. Do we have that nice doubling in that first hour? Then we'll be able to look at, that's your highest. And then we'll be able to look at lunch, dinner, and then bedtime. And then we'll be able to, if you wake up, a nighttime average there as well. So we can see, do we have that nice rhythm? And if you look at the Whitehall-Hurst 2 study, the closer your morning is with your nighttime. So where it's the highest and where it's the lowest, the closer that gets, that's a greater increased risk for cancer than smoking.
Yeah.
Right? So
100%.
That's like our flat cortisol rhythm, or even if it goes reverse, where you see night almost a little bit higher, big problems.
Yeah. So guys, you're not really you are not this person, if you're watching this right now going, I can't sleep at night. I'm just not tired at night. If you haven't done some lab work like this, and if you haven't confirmed that, if you can confirm I have high cortisol in the evening, of course you're not going to be able to sleep at night. You're going to feel insomnia. Like this stuff can be figured out nowadays. And as you guys were saying, it isn't that expensive. It does require some money. Whenever anybody asks me about functional medicine testing, I'm telling them, look, you're going to have to invest a couple grand into your health. The amount of benefit you get from that is so insane. I mean, it's changed my life. It's changed so many people's lives who have done it. I guess to wrap up, I just want to get some overall ideas from you guys of what people can do, how they can work with each of you, of course, and just what is the difference with functional medicine. And like what I'm sick of, I guess, is people going to their doctors. They might not be sick or dying, but they want to improve their health. They're having some issue. They're having acne. They're having hormone issues. They're tired. And they go to their doctor and they tell them about these issues. Nothing really gets done. Some tests might get done and they might think they get blood work. They're like, well, I got blood work done at my doctor. That doctor is looking at it and going, is this person going to die in the next couple of weeks? And then they just send them on their way. How do they work with you guys? Give me an overview of functional medicine in terms of how the process works, and let's do that.
Great question. So out of the gates, functional medicine is root cause medicine, right? When you find a functional medicine provider, you want someone that looks at you and says, okay, this is kind of where we're at, good, better, and best. This is kind of the initial kind of starting point to kind of get you moving. And then the more data we get, the more puzzle pieces we can lay down and we can see what the image is, right? And so my kind of model that I explain to patients is it's the SSS model. We have symptoms down here, okay? Doctor sees, your conventional MD sees, oh, depression, right? Gut issues. They see mood issues, energy issues. It's like, oh, here's Adderall, here's a birth control pill, here's a SSRI, and they're just managing these symptoms down here. That's it, right? Functional medicine goes 2 layers deeper. We go look upstream at the systems. That's the second S. Hormone system, thyroid, gut, immune, detox, right? And then we say, okay, good, this is the systems. How are those systems functioning? So it's system-based, function-based, symptom-based, versus just kind of spot treating with a drug, right? One's the insurance model, ICD-9, CPT code, drug to neutralize that symptom. Hopefully it doesn't get worse, or we prescribe more and more and more, and we chase our tails, or we go upstream to the systems, look at the function of those systems, and then also trace it back to the underlying stressors, physical, chemical, emotional stressors that cause those systems to dysfunction. Physical could be too much exercise, too little, sitting down all day. Chronic pain, right? Our chemical stressors are where functional medicine works the best. That's our glyphosate. That's our mold. These are our hormonal imbalances, gut function, leaky gut, nutritional deficiencies, and then emotional stress is important. If you're going through a divorce, you have financial issues, family stress, we want to make sure we're at least taking steps to at least neutralize that. So we look at the underlying stressors, and then we look at how that then fills up and impacts our systems, and look at the function of those systems, and then the underlying stress downstream, the underlying symptoms downstream. This is where conventional medicine just kind of whacks a mole. We want to go upstream to the systems and the underlying stress. And so as a functional medicine provider, when I work with a patient, we're kind of doing that skit with the 3 S's, and we're looking at kind of the history and how you uniquely broke down and the function of your systems and what we can do to actually neutralize the symptoms downstream from a root cause standpoint.
Now somebody might be watching this and they're like, you know what? I think I feel okay. Like I had a great case study of a woman who's like, I feel totally fine, but she was still interested in doing the labs. And it turns out she had parasites, she had nutrient deficiencies, she had low dopamine. And I'm like, you're an executive. Do you know how much better you're going to perform? Do you know how much more money I'm going to help you make? Like, we're literally helping people make more money. We're helping pilots fly the plane better. We're helping surgeons do better surgery because they're not anxious because we're rebuilding their neurotransmitters. We're saving marriages by boosting libido and improving hormonal function. We're helping children to focus so they don't get kicked out of school. The little 3-year-old boy I talked to you about, he was on the verge of getting kicked out of school. I mean, look at the stress that creates for a parent now who has to have a child to go to a different school or a special school or behavioral therapy. And so the goal of functional medicine that we're trying to do is to create a 1, 2, 3 step process for people to fix themselves now before they hit rock bottom. And I encourage people listening and watching, please don't wait until you hit rock bottom. Like, functional medicine saved my life. I was losing so much weight. I couldn't put on muscle no matter what I was doing with mass gainers and protein powders and grass-fed steak. I was literally, like, at one point in my life as a 19-year-old boy in the gym, 5 days a week, I was literally spoon feeding myself oatmeal and washing it down with like chocolate milk to try and just bulk up. And it was my gut the whole time. And here I am thinking like, I need this bulking diet, or you'll hear the gallon of milk a day, right? You'll hear stuff like that, these bulking strategies for these young men. It's like, look, dude, if we could just find and fix these gut issues now, we're going to have you enjoy your 20s. We're going to have you have not a fertility problem, right? So IVF, we could do a whole hour on IVF and how a lot of these women are being $10,000, $20,000 of IVF treatment to have babies. If we fix this stuff functional medicine wise now, so here's the deal. Libido and fertility are side effects of being healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Like, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so if you're forcing this baby to be conceived, what underlying toxins and issues could potentially be in that baby because of the transfer from the mother through the placenta and through the breast milk? And so the goal is help women detox before they get pregnant, help men improve their sperm quality, their sperm motility. Everything we've talked about today impairs sperm and also damages the DNA. If you look at a microscopic image of a sperm, there's a lot of mitochondria in the head of a sperm.
Yep.
All these toxins damage the mitochondria. Therefore, you have weak swimmers. So this is why we're in a fertility epidemic. This is why IVF is becoming the new norm. You could go look everywhere and you're going to see twins created by IVF from women that simply didn't hear about functional medicine. So our goal is hopefully we can get this done now before you go spend 10 times what you're going to spend with us. You're going to spend 10 times just to have a baby, and then hopefully they're healthy, but we have unfortunately seen issues in those offspring. And my pitch to everyone is that if you don't test, you guess. And I guessed for so much of my life. And you go to Whole Foods or you listen to a podcast or a blog and you hear about this new magical probiotic, but then this guy says his is better. And then this guy says this enzyme is better because of this. And if you buy it all, you end up with what I call a supplement graveyard. And you've got 30, 40, 50 supplements that kind of work, but you don't exactly know what you're doing. We're going to help you get laser focused to where you're doing the least amount of stuff and you're getting the best results. So we may, Dr. J will speak on this as well. Like on our intake form, we're going to ask people how many supplements you're taking. We're going to see 20, 30, 40. We're going to whittle that thing down to like maybe 5, 6, but we're going to get better results because it's laser focused and targeted based on your data, not what some N equals 1 guy is selling you.
Yep. And also just kind of the quote, this came up with this quote about a decade ago, and it just really resonates. It goes something like, if you don't listen to your body's whispers today, you'll have to endure its cries tomorrow. That's a good one.
That's facts. And, one thing I want to address right now, guys, is there is a lot of credentialism in the medical field. So people will be like, you should only trust an MD that's a specialist in this thing if you're having this issue. I think you both would agree if somebody's having some serious issue. I'm sure you guys have gotten on calls with a lot of patients, initial calls, and you're like, you need to go to a specialist right now. You're having some serious thing. Here's the deal, guys. And let me use Paul Saladino as a reference here because people give him hate that he went and he got his, he's a psychologist, right? Psychiatrist. Why would Saladino, knowing what he knows about nutrition, because you can study this stuff on your own, why would he sit through a bunch of nutrition courses to learn that you should eat soybean oil to lower your cholesterol? You can't use this credentialism, guys, so much of going, they don't have a degree in nutrition. Nutrition right now teaches people to not eat butter and eat soybean oil, to not eat too many eggs, to not eat red meat. So if we're existing in this system that is broken, you can't use this credentialism to say you should only trust an MD that's a specialist in this system that is broken. It's not a hate to Western medicine. I broke my arm one time. Loved that I was at Stanford Hospital. You have a serious issue, or even if, whatever, there's great doctors out there. But overall, we're at 50% obesity. We're at, I think, 20% diabetes. People have autoimmune issues. People have skin issues. It's become the norm. And this is the new way. What these guys are doing is the new way. And it's getting more accepted. And there's companies popping up doing lab testing and trying to look into it and stuff. These guys have been doing it for a long time. So I would just encourage everybody, if you can, how can they work with you guys? And then how could they find a functional medicine practitioner near them?
Sure. Let's speak on credentials just for a second. I did probably 1,000+ hours of nutritional education to become board certified in holistic nutrition. Also took a functional nutritional therapy program teaching you how do you actually use food as medicine. And then Dr. J and I both have taken extra functional medicine certification courses as well to be able to open up the doors to these labs. And now we're to the point which we have many medical doctor friends as well. A lot of our friends are MDs. And they'll tell you straight up, and even Paul, when I talk with Paul, he said, yeah, man, they don't teach this stuff. They don't teach you anything about mold in medical school. And now even one of the labs we use for urine, Mosaic Lab, they've now hired me to give talks to medical doctors, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it's kind of humbling. Like, I'm very grateful for that. I've run so many of them. Now these MDs are joining these functional medicine webinars. And they're like, and they're actually, honestly, a lot of the medical doctors, they're pissed off and they're disappointed. And they're like, why didn't they tell me this? I've never even heard of the Krebs cycle, or I've never even heard of this specific amino acid. Like, why have I not learned about that? And so, I've been fortunate to give some of these talks. Now, I did one on how do you save your marriage using functional medicine, and that was really cool. Like, some of the doctors, like, hey man, like, you might save my own marriage, and also, we've had some awesome mentors too. We should shout out Kalish as well.
Yeah, Kalish is great. Yeah. And he actually had a clinic here right in Del Mar.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So 06, 07, I was one of his first students there. So that's really cool. But talking about the credentialism, I think it's really important. There's a lot of people out there that think, oh my gosh, like, or even medical doctors themselves, right? There's like 2 camps they go into, right? They think, oh, anything that's important about health, I'm going to learn about it in medical school. And therefore, if I wasn't taught it, it's not important. That's the general assumption going in. Now, most doctors that understand functional medicine, they're not going to go spend 10 to 12 years and 300 or 400,000 to go through medical school, knowing that it's taking them 12 years away from the destination, and then they have to learn it back. A lot of them are like midship, probably like Saladino, where they're already there, they're already invested. Like, okay, crap. Like they start studying on the side, they get it, they realize anything that has to do with nutrition. It's from a pathology standpoint. Oh, vitamin C, scurvy, B1, beriberi, right? Vitamin D rickets. Okay, great. But that tells nothing about optimal health. And so some come out and they're $300,000 to $500,000 in debt. And they're like, okay, if I just open up my practice or join this hospital group, then I'm going to make $300,000 to $500,000 a year, pay back my loans, live this awesome lifestyle. But if I start to go this way over here, everything's in jeopardy. They may have come out to my medical license for not going with the standard of care. And so some walk in and they're just like, hey, I'm excited. I really want to do this thing. And they have to learn outside of their scope. And the others are just like, you know what? I'm going to just follow this track because this is the lifestyle I'm going to have. And some go one way, some go the other. But the key thing is you can't have that mindset. If it's medical school based, then it's important because it takes 20 or 30 years for something to be in the literature, for medicine to finally incorporate it in the curriculum. We know the influence on big pharma and big agri influencing a lot of that. We know that, right?
Yeah.
And so in general, functional medicine is the solution. But again, allopathic medicine, really important for acute things, very helpful. Good to rule out big stuff. But then functional medicine is going to be that system kind of functional based way of looking at it.
Absolutely. And if you're young watching this, you probably don't have some severe issue where you need to go to the hospital every day and to the doctor every day. And so if you're just like, you know what, I feel pretty good, but I want to feel better. I went and saw you recently. Guys, I feel great. Like my health is very dialed in.
Yep.
But I'm like, you know what, let's take it to the next level. I got sick in Mexico eating some food, and I get back, and what I know about functional medicine now, I know, okay, there might be some underlying stuff in my gut. Let's get it addressed. So you don't have to feel like crap to go get some functional medicine stuff done, see what's going on, because you can feel better, and then you'll be more successful in life because your emotions will be more regulated. You'll be able to work more. You'll be able to just optimize everything in your life. So let's summarize it. How can people work with you?
justinhealth.com. There's a little Work with Dr. J tab. You can hit it. You'll be able to schedule either a full patient consult or an intro consult if you're on the fence with my staff or team. Again, when you're there, there's a podcast link and YouTube link. We do a lot of videos like this where we collab with great people like Brendan and talk about these topics and we dive in. And so I just tell people, if you're interested in a topic, mold, whatever, go punch in that topic on YouTube or on a podcast and see what's there. Also, by the way, I had a patient just come in last month and he went to Mayo Clinic. And he did the Mayo Clinic intake. And on that intake, they talked about mold on the intake.
Nice.
He said he had mold. Guess what? Mayo said, we cannot work with any patients that bring up mold in their history at all.
Great.
Mayo, the most esteemed $10,000 intake to get in there. They said, oh, you brought up mold? We cannot help you. And this is the best, right? This is what you're left with. If you're the average consumer customer looking to get healthy, right? What do? This is what you're left with.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, I mean, all these esteemed, some doctors that have 3, 4, 5 sets of credentials after their names, they've already been to them before they come to us. And it's kind of humbling. It's like, really? I'm the guy that has to fix you? Really? Like after all these people, this dude on TV or whoever couldn't fix, this celebrity doctor couldn't fix you. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, and it's just to work with you guys is to save time because hopefully, I think in 30 to 50 years, who knows the exact timeline, this stuff will become more mainstream because it does save the system money overall at scale. We have a tremendous healthcare burden cost in this country. And if when you went to the doctor, they were able to look at some basic stuff, help people with their health, it would be less end costs overall in the system. So I do think in 30 to 50 years, this will be more of the norm. Big pharma and other players
driving the curriculum. That's the hard part. Is the curriculum is driven by
and the
big
insurance
pharma.
system. The guy who started Wades to Well was on Rogan talking about the insurance system, and it is exhausting to listen to. And again, this is not their doctors are evil and they don't want to help people. That is actually not what's going on. There are insurance companies, and if you were a traditional MD and I came to you and I said, I want to run a gut test, I want to run a vitamin D test, I think my hormones are, you could get your license taken away. You could be sued if you ran a bunch of those panels on me because the insurance companies will turn around. They will go, hey, wait, you ran a hormone test on a healthy, 30-year-old? That's not right. That's medical malpractice. That's fraud, basically, insurance fraud. So that's why, guys, when you go to the doctor, they don't know about these things and they might be very hesitant to give you these things. Evan, how do they work with you?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And also HSA and FHA. So any of like health savings plans with your employer, those will cover some of these functional medicine labs. And so I am actually seeing people use their quote work money, their work health savings accounts for functional medicine, which is incredible. So thank you for the opportunity. It's evanbrand.com. And Dr. J and I have been doing podcasts together for a decade plus. There's probably, I don't even know, 500-600 episodes or something like that. So we have 2 separate podcasts, but we often collaborate. It's called the Evan Brand Show. It's been around since 2012. And Dr. J's show is called Beyond Wellness Radio.
Wellness Radio, yep.
Yep. So check out the podcast as well. We'd love the opportunity to share more about this stuff. This is fun. Obviously, we love this stuff. We could keep going. If my voice was last another 8 hours, we'd stay here for another 8 hours and do it. But we love the opportunity to help you. And just to be clear, when we say functional medicine, this is not in a brick and mortar setting. It doesn't need to be done that way. It's through telemedicine. We work with labs across the country and actually globally as well. We have clients in Australia, New Zealand, all across the UK, London, you name it. We have international distributors in every country, every continent. We literally had a lab test delivered by a donkey in Ecuador.
Let's go.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah, the final mile delivery was a donkey to this woman's house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Panama, Latin America, all.
So then I'll summarize it with what it's like working. I've worked with Dr. Justin for a long time.
Yeah.
It is so easy to work with you. You get on a call.
Yep.
You talk about actual stuff that's going on in your life. You ask the right questions.
Yep.
And then the lab tests that are needed get delivered right to you. You do the lab tests at home. You mail them into the lab. Get on another call with you, and those results are there. We go over some stuff. There's occasional herbal protocols that we'll do.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you saw something crazy, you would tell me to go to the doctor. We didn't see anything like that. And then we retest with more lab tests.
Yep.
And then we see that stuff go away.
Yep.
And then, this is the thing, guys. The care ends with these guys. Like, you don't have to go to the doctor all the time. I'm a nerd with this stuff. I want to dive in more and more and tinker around. But these people help you get healthy, and then it's like, see ya. Keep your diet up. If anything else comes up, I'm here. It ends. And this is what also good PTs do. The stretch effect guys that I've been going to that are experts in this. I'm not going to go to those guys forever. Oh, did we fix your shoulder? Cool. Bye. It was nice working with you. So it's not this like rotating door of, So yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. They flew all the way out here. I had to get these guys on the show because they're just a wealth of knowledge, and we could literally do hours and hours of podcasts. So I appreciate it so much. Guys, check them out. Check out the podcast. And any questions you have below for them, just leave below, and they will try to get to them in some of their own content. We love you. Stay healthy. Peace.